And we are live. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Sales Development Excellence, a virtual conference for sales and SDR leaders who want to excel in 2024. My name is Olivia Nielsen. I'm CMO at Reply.io, and I'm super excited to meet you all today.
All right, guys, welcome. This is our third virtual conference on sales development and sales in general. My name is George Vitko. I'm Director of Partnerships here at Reply. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Before we start, we'd like to do a quick warm-up. Everyone, please share in the comments, introduce yourself in the chats, tell us who you are, where you're coming from, what your positions are in your organizations, what companies you're representing. And as always, feel free to ask your questions and share your thoughts there in the comments, because we want our audience to be part of the event along with our speakers. And as always, the authors of the best questions will get some cool swag at the end of the event. We're going to announce it at the end of this conference.
Great. And while you enjoy our sessions, feel free to share your key takeaways on LinkedIn. And do not forget to tag Reply.io in your posts, and you will have a chance to win Amazon gift cards worth $100. We will contact winners directly on LinkedIn. And also, we want to say thank you to our partners, Delfront, Rocket Reach, Close, Test Drive, SensePark, Outbound Squad, and Castify. Thank you for supporting sales development excellence this year.
All right, everyone. So buckle up and prepare for 3.5 hours of pure value, expert panel discussions, masterclasses, hands-on workshops covering all key aspects of sales development mastery. So let's go, shall we?
Sure. Our first panel is dedicated to the first and by far the most important part of sales development, precise prospect targeting and discovery. First off, let's meet our expert speakers. Deepak Vadera, Director of PLG Sales at Dealfront. Tim Kakir, CEO at Test Drive. Brad Smith, Account Executive Team Lead, EMEA at HubSpot. We are so happy to have you here today.
Same here. Very excited.
Yeah, can't wait, guys. Really looking forward to today.
Thanks, Olivia. Thank you for having me for another year.
We're super excited as well. So a note to the people in chat, please ask your questions and we will address them with the speakers later on. Now let's kick things off with some of our questions. And the first question, in your experience, what are the key challenges or common pitfalls that SDRs face when building their ICPs, and how can they be mitigated? Well, Brad, probably let's start with you.
Yeah, let's do it. I think there's so many kind of things to unpack on this question. I think it's a great question. I think the kind of main one and the big focus that I've always had kind of with any SDR team that I've been running or leading is around an ICP being too broad. I feel like so many people kind of sit there and they go, oh, yeah, they could do with our product, or yeah, but they have that challenge that may be able to be fixed. And the issue is you're then kind of reaching out to a ton of different people that work in a ton of different industries. And it's really hard to kind of get that messaging right. So I think the key thing is to really be uber focused or laser focused, whichever way you want to look at it, onto what your ICP is. And I think that's the sort of key there. And you want to be so specific down to the point of, not just the job title, but the types of responsibilities that person has in exactly the type of industry and what kind of sub-industry that you're looking to kind of focus on. And really then as an SDR, your job is to actually become become an expert on that particular industry. Because once it's really clear and you're laser focused, it's so much easier then to be really, really the kind of product expert, or at least the industry expert on that particular subject.
Thank you. Deepak, what can you add here?
I guess to add to that, I think the lack of understanding of who their ICP is usually boils down to them not even knowing who their own customers are often at times. Like, why did so-and-so buy? Why then? What are those customers really like? Are there certain patterns that you've identified, or can you see those from conversations with CS and having that active feedback loop through management through CS. And I guess that lack of understanding, again, of the ICP is often fueled by that misalignment with marketing as well, which tends to occur normally as the company scales and grows. Sales have their own numbers to hit and marketing have their own areas to focus on. And that misalignment just comes into play. And it's imperative for leaders on both sides to come together and remind everyone that we're aiming towards a one goal, and ultimately both objectives are intertwined there. What I've also seen in the past and still see to this day is not having access to the right data or up-to-date data causes further friction or leads to further pitfalls in terms of identifying the right ICP or keeping tabs on changes in market conditions and updates that are taking place in the industry.
Thank you for sharing. Tim, what's your thoughts?
I think everybody said some great stuff here, but I'm just going to go back a little bit on what Brad was saying. And to be honest, to summarize it, is really resource allocation, right? If you're allocating your resource to everybody but anybody, that might buy your product, might buy your service, you're not going to close as many deals. And your sales cycle potentially is going to be longer. You're not going to learn exactly to tailor the messaging. You're not going to know exactly how can you even refine your product, because you can also bring that feedback, right? As an SDR, you should also bring that feedback to your development team and to the rest. So for me, it's really the resource allocation. It's to really understand the niche ICP and not go broad, as Brad said as well, and I think Deepak touched upon that as well. And it's to be able to say, okay, my resources are on this ICP, on this ideal customer profile, because these are the ones that convert the fastest, and these are the ones that has the best NPS, and they're going to stay the longest, right? The longest LTV as well. So when you do that, you are growing. And if then you're going to start going into different verticals, because it starts being obvious that you're getting more leads from that side, and you're like, okay, well, let me revisit my ICP and then update that. I think we're going to talk about that in a bit, so let me stop it here.
Sure. Thank you for sharing. Okay, let's proceed with the second question. Finding the right balance between precise targeting and scalability can be challenging. And what strategies do you use to strike this balance in prospecting? Like for me as a marketer, this is the biggest challenge, actually, specifically when the product fits very carefully to a certain niche and certain audience, and you need to make a decision. Actually, do we want to, how to scale it? Is this audience has enough potential for scalability? So, Brad, what do you think?
Happy to jump in there. I think this is the age-old question since I had my first job in sales development. It's like, is it volume? Is it quality? Like, which is the best? And I feel like most things in life, people kind of think on the extremes. They think you've either got to be really uber focused on quality, or you've got to be making 1,000 dials a day, that type thing. And I think the real answer lies somewhere in the middle. And the way that I've always approached it with any SDR team that I've been sort of managing is around tiering your prospects. So, within any ICP, you're going to have, your tier one prospects. They're the VPs, the directors, the C-suites, who, if you have a conversation with them, immediately can become an opportunity. It can be fantastic. They usually hold the budget. And then you've probably got, your tier two and your tier three prospects who, might influence the decision, but might not be directly the right person. And I think that's kind of where you find that difference between targeting and the scalability piece. So I think with those tier one prospects, it's all about targeting them. It's about drilling down, knowing everything about them, all the personalization that you can find on them, and being really targeted with your outreach to them. And then maybe taking a bit more of a volume approach around those sort of tier two and tier three type prospects. And I think that's how you can kind of find a little bit of balance between the two. I think phone is obviously, and I know this is quite a controversial thing to say these days, but phone is still a great channel. And I think that can be a really useful tool to actually avoid having to fall into this trap of quality or quantity, because you kind of get a bit of both with the phone. If they don't pick up, you can do lots of dials. If they do, you can have a really personalized conversation with them. So that's kind of how I approach it, really.
Brad, I totally agree. I think it's because generally, for the most part, I've noticed there's been more of apprehensiveness from salespeople in terms of wanting to pick up the phone and making those dials. And I saw Tim nodding before, so I don't know. Do you want to chime in?
100%. I think that I love what Brad said, and I'm glad, Deepak, you got in there as well. Cold calling still works. It works for a lot of industries. There are certain industries it doesn't work. If you're going to sell it to CTOs of B2B SaaS in the US, forget about the CTOs. They're not going to pick up the phone. You're not going to get to them. But if you're going for a CFO, because that's your target or something like that, you potentially are going to get on the phone. So you really have to understand of your target, your ICP, and the persona behind it. Are they phone friendly? Do they like the phone? Do they still have, even SMS? Because SMS was gone. So when you send an SMS, everybody sees it. When is the last time you got an SMS on your phone? Very rare, So when you get it, you're like, oh, an SMS. It's in a green color. Normally you get iMessage and blue, or you get yellow and green in WhatsApps, right? So when you see that color, suddenly you're like, oh, I got an SMS. So that will alert you right away. But I was shaking my head, Deepak, because we have a lot of clients that come to us and they're like, cold calling doesn't work for us. And like, let's not do that. And we're like, no, we're going to do that the first month. We do that, and suddenly we find that cold calling really works. It's who do you call? When do you call? How do you call them? What's your messaging? And I think, as Brad said, if you know everything about that persona, you're going to speak their lingo. If you speak their lingo, if you speak their language from the first kind of 10 seconds, they're going to have a chat with you. And if you have a chat with them, then you might sell. But in sales, what do we want to do nowadays is to start that conversation. It's not to sell, it's to start a conversation. Because if we start conversing, maybe we're not going to sell to that person. And that person is going to say, oh, but my buddy in this business might utilize your platform, your service, and so on.
So you're actually referring to mostly customer development, right? It's more like, having those calls to identify the need, just to realize whether the product is a good fit. It's not a sales call itself, right? So it's mostly give me the idea about the business case. Let's say you met a person on a conference and you like, hey, I want to verify if my product idea will work for you and companies like you. Can I identify ideal customer profile out of this audience, right? So it's mostly not just hopping on the call with your potential leads or potential customers. It's mostly having those mutual conversations with people who are likely to share insights, right? Like industry representatives.
Well, I'd want to say something there, 100%. But also, if your lead research from the beginning is very good and is very targeted, you're not gonna converse with someone that has nothing to do with what you're selling, right? So again, and I always say this to my teams, and when you look at the process, and you have 10 steps, if you keep optimizing step 1, step 10 optimizes as well. Right. And we forget, me even as a CEO, sometimes I go to step 7 and I'm trying to optimize step 7. But if I just work on step 1 each time, that automatically gets better. So if your lead research gets better and you're starting to get really down to that niche and the data is correct and the people are correct, you're going to have a better time and you're going to sell much better. So I think it's really going back to that. And Olivia, I think you said it. It's, the user research should have been done already, but it's really what I call as well is a bit like the collaborative problem solving. So you get on the phone or you get on a discussion with someone is because they have a problem, right? And hopefully you are the solution. Your business, your service, your product is the solution. But together you're collaboratively solving a problem. And if you do that with a lead, they close themselves. They close themselves because they see that you have the solution. You came up with the solution together, and they feel empowered. They're like, oh, well, I came up with the solution with you. They'll close,
Right.
But if you
Like,
try to push them,
I'm
they're not going
heard,
to close.
right?
Sorry? Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
heard. Exactly. That's what it is. Yeah.
And I think to piggyback off your point there, Tim, what I used to always kind of say to like my SDRs is, let's say using your example there, that they're reaching out to CFOs. Now, the fact is that SDR is probably speaking to more CFOs than that CFO is speaking to, right? So quite often they know a bit more about what other CFOs are going through and the common challenges than that CFO might even know itself. So I think, you never want this attitude, do you, of like, you're interrupting their time, you're giving them a call. Like you say, Tim, we're calling them, with hopefully a solution to some of the problems they have. And if they don't have any problems that we can solve, that's fine. They might have wasted a minute of their time.
But I love what you're saying, Brad, because most of the time they don't even know their problem yet, right? But if you're asking the right questions and they're like, oh, wow, I do have that problem. And I think, Brad, is what you said, because if you're calling hundreds of CFOs a week and you spoke to thousands of CFOs in your career in the last few months, and you're speaking to one CFO and he doesn't know, he's like, oh, no. And then you ask a question and he's like, oh, yeah, I do have that problem. Oh, well, that is a serious problem. Why? Do you have a solution for that? Then you want that conversation. Now it's your turn to explain how you can solve that. So that's what we're trying to do in sales.
Yeah.
Challenging question. When we're talking about identifying an ideal customer profile and specifically having those customer development calls, which responsibility it is? Is it marketing responsibility, or it's a collaboration, marketing and sales, CEO of the company?
Olivia, sorry, just to confirm your question, is that around whose kind of responsibility is it to define the ICP, or?
It's like mostly, how this responsibility is split or shared between the departments. Specifically when we're talking about, hey, like once we are ready to say, this is our recipe, we need to run those calls. So how this, like, who's responsible for saying, like, hey, we did these calls, we analyzed these profiles, these potential audiences, and here we go with this and this.
Yeah, I mean, happy to chime in. I actually think Tim and I might have quite different answers for this, just because obviously Tim's a CEO and I'm not. But happy to chime in with mine, and it might ruffle a few of Tim's feathers. So no, I'm just kidding. But I think in most businesses, probably it comes from the top down in terms of what the ICP is, who we're trying to sell to. I mean, I'm not saying this is necessarily the right way, but I think that's quite often the case. I think, like most things, really the ICP becomes whoever it is that seemingly wants to buy your solution, whoever has those problems. It's a kind of natural thing to an extent. It's almost, the way I see it, it's like the value of something is what someone's willing to pay for it, rather than what someone values something at, So I think that's kind of my thought process on it a little bit. I think it's a team effort. And I think the key is that constant feedback loop around, actually, this isn't working, or we're having this feedback when we speak to this type of person, and that's how the ICP, I guess, develops. But I'll pass over to Tim, because I don't know if he's got a slightly different view on that.
Well, I love what you're saying, Brad. But also, let's not forget, Brad works for HubSpot. HubSpot is one of the biggest companies out there, right? So you guys have definitely defined that millions of times. You've optimized millions of times your ICP, your messaging, your website has changed I don't know how many times. Your pricing, like I was joking a few years ago, I think you have a team that says, how can we make our pricing more complex? And they try their best to make the pricing more complex, but nobody understands. They go to a free plan and they're like, oh, that's not enough for me. Let me buy $50 seats here, 10 of them. Let me buy marketing seats. Let me buy these seats. A joke, but it's kind of true, isn't it, Brad? I don't know if you have that team. I have to ask you, do you have that team really? Like pricing complexification team?
I'm not sure. I can't confirm or deny.
Awesome. But just to add something to what Brad was saying, and jokes aside, I think that especially on the early days, marketing is a long-term thing, right? It's a mid-term to long-term. You're not going to get answers about your ICP and stuff with marketing, right? So everybody should start outreach outbound today, right? If you haven't done outbound, start it now, because you're going to have the quickest answer to your messaging. You're going to have the quickest answer to, is this my ICP? No, F off. And then you have so many of those, you're like, that's not my ICP, right? And you keep trying things. I think in sales, in 3 months, you are going to get answers. In marketing, it's going to take you 6 to 9 months to get just a little bit of an answer. So I think the combination is, Olivia, you were asking the question, and Brad, of course, in a size of HubSpot, I think it's top down, but in a size of my company, it's we all chime into that discussion, and I think this is why, if you do research a little bit about my past podcasts and stuff that I was saying, I think that marketing and sales should disappear. We should all be growth. We should all be a growth team, right? Because, marketing will say, here's an MQL, and then you're like, well, yeah, that's MQL. Okay. Is it an SQL? No, it's not an SQL. This is wrong. Or it's not closing. And then sales will say, well, marketing's bringing terrible leads. and then marketing will say, well, sales don't know how to close deals, and then I've seen this so many times. But when you put them in a room and you tell them, brainstorm together and work together for a month, and then they start loving each other, and then they start giving feedback to each other, and suddenly the ICP, that messaging is across the board, like not perfect, because nothing is ever perfect, but it starts becoming really, really good.
I think if I can just add some final thoughts there, just on that point, I think having that active feedback loop is absolutely imperative. So say, for instance, you're working with RevOps to understand and collect and analyze data on existing product usage, having that sent over to marketing to make it understandable in a way that's, again, easy for sales to digest, so they can make the adjustments that they can in their cadences and whatnot, and kind of go from there. So there is absolutely a need in terms of having everyone aligned and everyone on the same wavelength. So it is an absolute team effort.
So true. And this brings us to another question about methods. What methods do you use to research and get data for creating and refining your ICPs?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off again if you want me to. I think this is a really interesting question, and I think the answer to this probably really depends in terms of what type of business you're in, how big the business is, and things like that. I think probably in a lot of bigger businesses, a lot of this content probably does come across from marketing or from enablement in the form of training, where it's kind of very much this is what you need to know, these are the challenges they're facing, etc. But I know a lot of people on this call today are going to work in probably smaller businesses where they might be the only SDR or one or two SDRs and not a huge amount of kind of training above them. And I think there's so many tools out there at the moment that kind of help you do that. I think it's just a case of getting stuck in. So, one example might be is if, let's say, for example, I'm just going to pick a random example, that you're focused on the telecommunications industry, okay, in the UK. Now, the first thing I would probably do if I started a job in there is find loads of industry white papers, anything I could get free online that I could download as a PDF, pay ChatGPT, whatever it is, for the slightly premium version, upload all of these PDFs and say, draw down what are these biggest challenges that these telecommunication companies are having. It sounds really like simple and obvious, but it's such an easy way of doing it. And I find anything to make my life easier, and that saves me time. So that's probably what I would do, and find out what those challenges are. Gather data about the industry, really find out what's going on. Because that effectively, like Tim says, allows you to have the best conversations. And that's all sales is at the end of the day, is having a conversation and hoping that you kind of hit jackpot, really.
I mean, if Brad, I smiled when you said ChatGPT, because I was hoping that somebody's going to bring it up, because all my webinars I just speak about ChatGPT lately. That's been my obsession the last year. And come on, $20 a month for the advanced data analysis. Now that Brad's saying, upload your PDFs, upload your whole export of your CRM of close lost, all of them. Just upload it and ask those questions, and you will be mind blown. I did this on a webinar and people were mind blown. Like, you can do that. And I didn't even I was just doing it live. Just upload that CSV with that Excel sheet, whatever you have, as an export, ask these questions. And it's going to really brainstorm from an angle that doesn't have tunnel vision. We have tunnel vision. We all have tunnel vision in our companies. It's, in the first month, you start getting tunnel vision because you meet the CEO. It tells you the mission, vision, values of the company. You're like, okay, that's it. And you suddenly are in that tunnel now. So ChatGPT really helps me get out of that tunnel vision. So I definitely recommend it for everybody. But if I may, and I know, Deepak stopped me because I'll speak for hours. But I think that there's a combination of a few things, and I'll just tell him and I won't get into them. But internal data, that's what we're saying with Brad, upload it and get that. Surveys and feedback, 100%. Market research. Don't do just market research before you start your startup or whatever. Keep doing market research, because the market changes a lot, as we know. Social media and online communities. We don't tap into this enough, and online communities are everywhere. Reddit. If you're a bit geeky or product or something like that, you want a good community, go to Reddit and say something wrong about that and see what's going to happen. And then they'll all attack you, and then you'll learn so much from it. It's incredible. I was just reading this. somebody was saying they have 2 Reddit profiles. They have one which is for themselves and positive stuff, and they have one, they ask a question and then they go with the other one and they give a wrong answer because nobody wants to help people, but everybody wants to correct people.
So true.
Yeah, and then you can have, obviously, like us, we do market research, we do lead research for you. We've done it for 500 plus customers, so we know a little bit the ins and out of that. And then keep doing those interviews with your customers. Tap into lookalike audiences and see if that lookalike audience is it working. If it's working, that means you do have a good audience. Look at your competitors, keep analyzing them, and many other things that could add here. But I think that today, almost ending 2023, we have AI. We have this amazing tool of AI. It can search the web, maybe not the free version, of course, and maybe the Bing search is not amazing, but there's many other tools out there. There's plugins. You can actually get those answers in minutes instead of months. Before, we would give a project to someone and wait for months. Now we can actually get that almost in half an hour. You can get these answers.
Tim, to your point, I think communities like Reddit have been incredibly powerful. People aren't so worried about opening up about their true state of affairs or what's taking place in their companies because, again, they can remain truly anonymous and no one can trace it back to who they are versus, for example, on LinkedIn, where people might be a bit more apprehensive to say certain things because they know their colleagues and peers are constantly keeping an eye on their content and so on. So there's a wealth of information being shared in these communities that hasn't really been tapped into by a lot of people. At Dealfront, again, shameless plug, since we offer a data enrichment and sales intelligence tool, we've been pretty much drinking our own champagne in that sense and combining that with a series of automations, kind of to what Brad and Tim mentioned, again, having established a lead scoring model and then being able to better prioritize what leads should we dedicate more attention and focus on, and then combining them with tools like Built With, for example, have been incredibly useful for us since we have a web visitor product and we can analyze and see what other tools or what other software have companies incorporated it onto their website and see where our lead feeder product can help complement those efforts. And for example, if we identify they've got the HubSpot plugin, we know that chances are they're most likely using HubSpot as their CRM. And since we have a native integration with HubSpot, it kind of opens up the door for us to plug that in, and yet becomes another avenue for a conversation starter too.
I love what Deepak said, and I'm just going to go back to something you said, drinking our own champagne. I prefer it so much more than what my business partners and we say. It's eating our own dog food. So I'm going to change that to drinking our own champagne. That's so much better. Thank you.
Slightly nicer.
Yeah, my sexier. I like it. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing. And we also started to talk about the ever-evolving ICP, which brings us to another question. How, with actually ever-evolving buyer personas and market dynamics, how do you ensure that your ICP remains relevant and up-to-date? And what's your approach to adapting your ICP over time?
Probably I can start. I'd say just being aware of the market dynamics, assessing and anticipating where the trends are heading towards, what's happening in the industry. For example, again, for us, looking at the lead feeder product as a silo, we know that third-party cookies are going to be sunset in a couple of months, and we're already gearing towards how we can how companies can go forward from when that happens. So just understanding better what's happening in the industry, what are the other players talking about, and the implications of certain things if companies don't think about them. So yeah, just being, I guess, on top of where the market is heading into, and trying to assess the implications of not doing or of not taking the right approach, which your product can ultimately fix. Just staying ahead of the curve.
Just going back to something, it's we were talking. I think Brad started the conversation about TAM, target addressable market, if I'm not mistaken, and I want to bring that back because if your target addressable market in the beginning, was 100,000 companies, and you are at 95,000 companies already in your portfolio. Let's say it's crazy numbers, but then you might want to really start looking at renovating your ICP and so on. If your target addressable market is only 100 companies, if your average revenue per account is huge, that's going to be enough. But if you're just selling a SaaS product at $500 a year, you don't have a good business there. Change that, check some different ICPs. But also, I think that we at Tasktrack, we just did the exercise ourselves of changing our ICP again, like optimizing and re-discussing and brainstorming and hashing out our ICP. Why? Because we have that data of customers, right? So when I look at past data of 3 years of our customers, and I suddenly see that there is a few customers that has been with us with no problem, and they're all in the same industry, and that wasn't in my ICP, I'm like, oh, there's something wrong here. Hold on, guys, what's happening here? They're my top customers. They're all in the same industry. They pay the biggest bucks, and in 3 years, they haven't even complained once. And then I look a little bit more. They've been together with us even 5-6 years, and you're like, okay, why don't we have this in the ICP? Our ICP was something completely different than that, and we have changed it because we have data to back it up now. And I think there was a concept of core customer, and I kind of mentioned in the beginning, it's really the people that stay the longest, that causes you the less problems, right? And that pays you the most money. They're happy, and if they're happy, you're happy.
Brad, what's your point here?
Yeah, exactly. I think, to be honest, Tim and Deepak there, made some really great points, and I kind of agree with both of them. I think kind of the only thing to add on that, I think, is more of maybe an SDR that's on the floor and how they would maybe think about it. It's just keep a pulse check on the deals that are closing. Like, just have a look. It doesn't have to be necessarily particularly data driven, but what are the AEs closing? Like, who are they speaking to? Are the were they going from everyone speaking to marketing managers to now they're all speaking to sales directors? Like, ask, why is that? Like, is the product kind of developing and supporting that? And I think just keeping a bit of a pulse on it. But I think I agree, and I think almost like what Tim is saying is like there's no need to sort of change your ICP too frequently if it's working, and be focused on it. Don't sort of chop and change at the first sort of couple of days of it, of having a bit of a quiet process or whatever. So yeah, just stick at it and kind of know your ICP from the ground up, and you're good there.
Thank you for sharing. We have 2 minutes left and a lot of questions from the audience. So I will ask you to stay for 5-10 minutes after the session and answer the questions in chat. But I think we'll still have time to cover one of them. In relation to allocating resources and prospects, what if you have multiple companies or products and you need to concentrate on? How do you then become an expert?
You have multiple products and multiple companies as an SDR. Well, you're kind of in trouble, aren't you? Because you're being a bit bipolar. You have to keep switching mindsets. You have to keep switching messaging. You have to keep switching things. So maybe get somebody else to do another of the product. I don't know if that helps, but that's the quickest thing that comes to my mind.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of echo what Tim's saying there. I think that's a really tricky situation to be in, and I think the saying is "Jack of all trades, master of none." I think you've probably got to embrace that if you are in that situation. I think just maybe kind of learn a script in terms of, right, these are the 5 different personas we're going after in completely different industries about different products. These are going to be the challenges. I'm just going to know it and kind of wing it. I know that doesn't sound like a very good answer, but the fact is you're not going to become an expert of 6 different industries, 6 different products. There's no chance. So just pick up the phone, have a conversation and see what happens, really.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Brad.
Can I just add something to Brad? Because, that quote is, I love that quote. And then I really dig into that quote. And actually the full quote apparently is, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one.
There you go.
I'll put it on the chat.
Yeah. to add to what Brad said, I think, if there's multiple products, there probably needs to be 2 sales motions. So yeah, maybe there could be one that's more product led versus another one being more sales led. So ideally having that split into different teams would make sense.
Thank you, our panel experts. What a great start of the event. Thank you all for joining us today and sharing this experience. And let's move to the second presentation.
Hello, everyone.
All right. There you go. Hi, Vlad. I'm going to introduce you in a second, but just wanted to say what a great start to the event. It was amazing. Even though in my world they're called slightly differently. It's ideal partner profile as opposed to ICP customer profile. I wrote down maybe 10 different kind of takeaways. Some of it is obvious and kind of industry standard, but it's such a good reminder that these are the basics. Phone is a great channel. Know your persona, speak their lingo, make good research, have a paid ChatGPT subscription, create 2 Reddit profiles to ask wrong questions, or rather give wrong answers. Such a great such a great panel. So thanks everyone. Thanks Tim, Brad, and Deepak. Now over to Vlad. So this is our first presentation on our agenda. Vlad is our VP of Growth, who has been our SDR team leader for a number of years. So he's still the best person to talk about upping your SDR game and sales development game in general. Vlad, thanks for joining us today. I'm gonna give the mic to you, and the floor is yours. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. By the way, I also wanted to say it's a great start of the event. What's a coincidence, right? Feel free to stop me, George, because probably I have maybe even 40 minutes of content, but I will do my best to finish this as fast as possible. Okay, so hello everyone again. Super happy to see you here for the 3rd year in a row. It's like a deja vu for me. The 3rd year, the 3rd October 26th or 25th for me. As always, super happy to be here. Let me start sharing my screen and we can jump to the topic right away. So today I'll be talking about like 5 creative strategies to build targeted lists for your outbound motion, for your outbound and cold outreach processes. My name is Vlad. I'm head of growth here at Reply with SDR's background. I spent probably 6 years here at Reply building our SDR team, building different strategies, trying new things, mostly prospecting, list building, cold outreach, templates, sequences. So I'm still keen on these topics. So that's why I'm super happy to share my ideas on creative list building strategies. So here's what we will cover today. We will talk about 5 strategies to build targeted lists. I will share useful tools on how to implement these strategies, how to build these workflows and playbooks. I will share bonus content, and it's going to be like enormous amount of useful content. So we will share everything in the chat after the presentation. So stay tuned. First of all, why it matters, why creativity, why creative list building strategies are important nowadays. Typically, we all think that cold outreach is all about email templates, sequences, follow-ups. You can just add new prospects to your sequences. You can keep using the same email templates, and you want to expect the same results. But in the reality, right, cold outreach is changing, and it's like a whole new story, especially when it comes to new problems with email deliverability, warm-up, relevance, link tracking, right? And there are a bunch of things that we need to take into account. So to stay up to date, we need to change, and because outreach is changing, and we need, as SDRs, as salespeople, we need to adopt all these new strategies to get what we want, what we need, like booked meetings, right? So, here's the first strategy. It's I would say an easy start for us. Some simple strategy here. It's the strategy called waterfall email finders.
For example, we all use different email finders, data vendors, data providers, and typically, probably, they can find maybe 40 to 50 emails from the whole list, right? Then you switch to another provider and it can find maybe 55% or 60%. And you're still upset because you have 1,000 leads, right? But you can find maybe 500 out of them because there is no email for them. So there is a new concept, a new trend in list building called waterfall email finders or cascade email finders, whatever they call it. This tool unified different email finders, all like major, all the biggest ones, email finders out there. They just combine them in one place, in one product, under one umbrella. And if provider X can't find it, then probably they will try to go to provider B or C, and again, unless they can find email. So using this waterfall email enrichment or data enrichment process, you can easily increase number of emails in your list. Typically, all these tools state that they can find probably 30 to 40% more emails rather than just only one data provider or email finder. So here are a few waterfall tools like Captain Data, Clay, Waterfall, Full Enrich, and Better Contact. I will encourage to give them a try all because there are some differences in the concept, but they still all about the same. It's all about waterfall tools, waterfall email finding process. Thus, more leads in your cold outreach because you can find more emails. Number 2 is social selling, and I would say that social selling, personal brands, building in public are becoming increasingly important in B2B marketing, B2B sales. So it's a whole new reality for us. And social selling is becoming an important part of cold outreach as well, and list building process. So here are a few ideas on how to utilize social selling for your sales process. Number 1 is social listening. Okay, so here's how it works. Imagine this. There are millions of people who talk online, who ask online about specific issues, specific problems. For example, in this case, people ask about CRM. They want their audience to recommend them a new CRM, and it happens with LinkedIn, it happens with Twitter or X, and it happens with Reddit. So you can use specific tools that will listen all these keywords in the entire internet, and they will send you a feed every day or every hour. They will send you a feed of all new occurs of this intent or this signal. So you can add a prospect to your sequence. For example, if you are selling a CRM software or CRM consulting services, you can say, hey, noticed on your LinkedIn that you have been asking about CRM system for your new business, want to chat about CRMs, something like this. So yeah, social listening is number 1 here. And here are a bunch of tools that can help you with this list building strategy, like Mention, Vario, Uscan, Google Alerts, gonna work as well. But probably this strategy will work for high volume, well-known keywords, for example, CRM, or maybe hiring, or maybe, I don't know, marketing tool or something like that. It won't work for a niche or specific verticals, but it will work for high volume keywords. Number 2 is social automations. There are a bunch of tools that help you automate outreach on LinkedIn, X, or even Reddit. So here's how it works. You can scrape or download the list of prospects who follow some person or influencer or decision maker or well-known person in your vertical, your industry, or follow an account of your competitors, let's say on Twitter. So you can just download the list of these people and add them to your sequence. And to be honest, this was one of the most successful sequences here at Reply a few years, because we were able to download the list of followers of some big CRMs on Twitter. And here's how it works. Yeah, you can say, hey, notice you're following, let's say, I don't know, Salesforce on Twitter. Probably you're interested in CRMs. We have integrations with CRM, so you got it right. So yeah, there are a bunch of tools for X, for LinkedIn, and for Reddit here. And strategy number 3 is post likers. It's a more growth hacking strategy, and here's how it works. Imagine that someone created a LinkedIn post, and it's about a problem or an issue. In my case, it's about, let's say, prospecting and as outbound. Sorry, no-code prospecting and outbound as a growth. And this post got like almost 200 likes. So here's what we can do here. We can just download the list of these likes, like people who liked this post, and add them to a sequence saying something. Hey, notice that you engaged with Vlad's LinkedIn post on how to use no-code prospecting. Love his idea. By the way, we are building a tool for no-code prospecting. Is it something you want to chat about, for example? And I have, let's say, I had probably 5 conversations in the last few months about this strategy, and everyone was saying that this strategy is quite successful for them. There are a bunch of tools that allow you to download the list of people who liked specific posts. It's going to be Phantom Buster, Texao, Captain Data, etc. And bonus content here, the first one. Here's a list of 900 tools. We updated our sales tools catalog. There are now 900 sales tools categorized across 60 different categories. So yeah, you can find everything you want, starting from Twitter outreach, LinkedIn outreach, Reddit outreach, social selling, social listening. Here you can see a bunch of categories out there. Strategy number 3 is warm interest and probably partnerships. George may say a few words after the presentation on this. Sounds like partnerships and sales are becoming even closer in this decade. Sounds like partnership teams will cooperate with sales teams to introduce probably a new trend in sales development, referral sales, co-selling, co-marketing, partnerships, all about that. So creative strategy number 3 is warm interest and referral sales. So here's how it works. Your company, your SDRs, your salespeople have a list of prospects, for example, 10 companies. And there are a bunch of strategies you can rely on to get into these accounts, right? It's going to be outbound, ABM, ads, I don't know, maybe some outdoor ads, right? Conferences, webinars, etc. But what you can also do, you can ask for an intro to connect you with these 5 companies, to connect you with decision makers from these companies. And you can ask your friends on LinkedIn, check mutual connections, check common connections, and ask for this warm interest. And that's how you can increase chances to get positive response, right? And what they call these days, these strategies, near bound. And there are 3 strategies. There are 3 ways to work with warm interest. Number 1 is buyer and sellers marketplaces. There are some marketplaces where, let's say, B2B sellers and B2B buyers come together, and account executives can schedule calls with decision makers on these marketplaces. I, as a decision maker, can get, let's say, $100 for my time, and an account executive can book a meeting right away. Number 2 is account mapping. You can check with your partners, with your partners, check or account overlaps, with your company and your partner company, and then boom, you can ask for an intro or co-sell or co-marketing approach. And warm interest, here's how it works. There are a bunch of tools, this form, cable, vector. Here's how it works. You can ask all employees in your company, connect their LinkedIn accounts. These tools will build a huge list of connections into one combined place, and then they will check for connections. And for example, your account executives or your SDRs can ask your colleagues to make an intro with their network. So it's like a whole new approach. To be honest, I haven't given it a try yet, but sounds like this gonna be a future of outbound and inbound and and partnerships. So super happy to see how this trend will evolve, and sounds like this will work mostly for mid-market and enterprise sales processes. I'm not sure if it works for SMBs, but again, I think it's worth mentioning this strategy. Idea number 4 here is to flip the idea of ideal customer, the company profile. So here's how it works nowadays. Your SDRs know everything about your ideal company profile, ideal buyer profile. Typically, it's going to be something like, let's say for us, SaaS companies located in the US, Europe, something between 11 to 200 employees. And our SDR salespeople know about this ideal company profile, right? And we will just download the list of all accounts that match our profiles, and we will find decision makers in these accounts, and then we will send just generic emails, and we will just thank them. Hey, noticed you're working at a company. I'm not sure if you're in market, but probably you need something for your sales team. Let's chat. And then we will probably add something like PS line. Hey, noticed you're from London or from San Francisco. Just some funny and fun PS intro lines, right? Icebreakers, we call it. But there is a missing piece here. And sounds like the future of outbound and list building is to add an intent layer to your ideal company profile, which means instead of building a list of, let's say, SaaS companies located in North America, we will build something like, okay, I will find companies that are currently hiring SDRs that match my ideal profile, my ideal customer profile. So, and in this case, there is no need to fake our personalization, right? Because we can use intent and triggers as a reason for outreach. So basically, the future of list building and outbound process is trigger-based sequences and list building approach. So there is no need to fake our personalizations. There is no need to fake our email sequences, because we can use triggers as a reason for outreach. And if we talk even more about this specific strategy, we can talk about trigger-based list building. Sometimes they call it signal-based or intent-based. It's still all about the same. It's all about triggers. And signals that indicate that B2B buyer is probably ready to talk about your solution, your I don't know, your product, your services, etc. And here are a bunch of triggers, and your company, your salespeople, your like, I don't know, your managers should find those triggers on their own, and just start using them. For example, here a list of 8 probably commonly used, most frequently used triggers. Number 1 is post likers. I already mentioned this. Just download the list of people who liked a specific post and use this as a reason for outreach. Number 2 is department growth. For example, in Sales Navigator, you can use a filter, department headcount growth. In my case, it's sales. When they grow 50 to 100% in 6 months, it means that they're actively growing their sales team. So probably they need sales engagement tools, sales training, consulting services, etc. Right? Because they're like massively increasing their sales team headcount. Strategy number 3 is website changes. This may work for SEO, PPC, marketing agencies. For example, you can track changes on specific websites when they change their main homepage, when they change their pricing, or when there are like new errors on their website, when their, let's say, global rank is drops down, etc. There's a bunch of triggers related to the website. For example, ads. When they launch new ads, you can detect those changes. Trigger number 4 is job changers. You can reach out to decision makers who changed their job in the last 90 days, and then probably when they change their company, probably they want to implement something new. Probably they want to change playbooks. They want maybe to change tools, right? Because they want to, let's say, show off themselves, right? But that's good for us. That's good for us. Technographics, Deepak already mentioned today. The strategy commonly used, intent-based strategy for lots of SDR teams. You can download the list of accounts use specific technology or compatible technology with your solution, with your product. Let's say for us here at Reply, we know that companies that use, let's say, Salesforce, Intercom, probably they have a higher chance to chat with us. Hiring trigger, again, when they're actively hiring new salespeople. Startup outreach. This one won't work for high ACV, high contract value deals, but it could be an opportunity for smaller agencies that want to find new opportunities. You can just download the list of recently founded startups, let's say on Product Hunt, Beta List, whatever, and just say, hey, noticed you recently launched a new company. Probably you want, in most cases, they need basic but important services like marketing, blogs, SEO, right? They need maybe PPC ads, maybe some consulting on how to grow, scale faster, right? So this strategy can work for agencies. And dark funnel, you can track companies who are visiting your website. Again, Deepak already mentioned this one. You can track G2 visits. You can track when they are searching something specific in Google, for example, sales engagement, and there are a bunch of tools that can provide this intent data for you. And okay, I spent probably a few hours within the past few days to build this list of 31 more trigger-based outreach ideas. We will share the list with you. So I hope you can find something for your company that will fit your sales development process, your cold outreach process. So yeah, there are a bunch of other trigger-based outreach ideas there. And bonus content, additional bonus content here. Feel free to subscribe to our net new newsletter called Sales Pulse. Probably this one, I'm like 95% confident that's going to be your next favorite sales newsletter. And it's a weekly newsletter on prospecting, sales advices, lead generation tips, list building tips, all about that. So yeah. Also, let's stay in touch. Here my Linktree account with a bunch of useful tools, links. Happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. And as always, thank you.
All right, thanks, Vlad. Great presentation as always. So we did have a few questions. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time. I'll just ask one before, and maybe like 30 seconds before we move on to the next panel. But so you were talking about these triggers. You were talking about these events that are a great trigger for cold outreach. But we all know that the more advanced these triggers are, and the tools providing these triggers, the more expensive the tools providing these triggers. So do you recommend, what's your favorite, basically, if you have any data, if you have any opinion on which triggers would be the most effective if we were to choose post likers, department growth, website changes, all of that? Like what's the best one?
A great question. So probably I would say that probably the biggest trend in sales development and list building is there is a democratization of tools. There are now like thousands of tools, and they are getting cheaper, which is good for us. So you shouldn't spend thousands of dollars to build a tech stack for this trigger-based approach. You can even use Sales Navigator for that. There are a bunch of probably 10 triggers that can be used with Sales Navigator. Probably hiring intent, department growth, company growth, and then probably 5 more triggers. So Sales Navigator is fine. Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Again, thanks for the presentation. We're going to move on. Feel free to ask your questions if you haven't already, and Vlad is going to be happy to answer in the chat. We're moving on. I think now that Vlad has covered the strategic part of building targeted lists, I think the next topic would be a nice segue to diving a little bit deeper into the tactical aspects of sales engagement. And the topic is the multi-channel success formula: top channels, sequence flows, and messaging tips. It looks like we're one speaker short, but I'm going to be joining as needed. It is my pleasure to welcome our speakers. Ed Young, Vice President of Sales Operations at Martel Group, and Mark Colgan, Sales Consultant and Coach. Hello, gentlemen. Thanks for joining our discussion today.
It's great to be here.
Hey, George. Great to be here too.
Okay, so let's just probably dive right into it. We decided to start with some of the easy ones. By the way, to everyone watching this or listening to this, feel free to ask your questions in the chats. We normally get the biggest amount of questions on these tactical topics, so feel free to stay active in the chats. Again, we usually reward that by the end of the conversation, by the end of the event. We're going to start with, again, like a very, I would say, standard, typical question. What is your typical cold outreach, most successful cold outreach sequence look like in terms of structure, the number of touch points, channels used, your favorite channels maybe, and what are the messaging kind of tactics in those? Do you like formal? Do you like informal? Like what's your best sales cold outreach sequence look like? Let's start with you, Mark.
Cool. Okay, so quite a big question, and I'll do my best not to take up all the time answering it. So I prepared a few thoughts on this, and really the best or my typical cold outreach really does depend on the total addressable market that I'm trying to reach out to, and also the deal size. So that determines what channels and how detailed I'd need to go with my messaging. My sweet spot, though, is really combining email and LinkedIn. I not saying necessarily that the phone doesn't work or cold calling is dead. That's not my argument at all. It's just that I get pretty good results with my email and LinkedIn approach. And there are times where I add in phone if I'm not getting the results that I expect to with the cold email. But in terms of the sequence design, typically it's around 10 steps In those steps includes between 5 to 6 emails, 3 to 4 LinkedIn touch points as well. So a touch point might be view the profile, send a connection, send a message if they connect, or engage with some content. And that all happens over 21 days. And then just to talk a little bit more about the copy of the messaging, it's very specific to the problems or challenges that the prospects I'm reaching out to will face. So that way, through the right segmentation and list building, I can send a one-to-many message to the same persona about a specific challenge. And with every sequence, I always pick 2 problems, and I split those 2 problems across those 4 or 5 emails.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. I'll quickly introduce Nick. Thanks, Nick, for joining. I wasn't sure if you were going to be joining or not, so I haven't introduced you yet. Nick Persico, Director of Sales at Marketing at Close. Welcome back, Nick. Thanks. Happy to have you back. We're talking about the structures, the best performing outreach campaign structures, and later on we're going to dive into other aspects of it. But I'm gonna let Ed talk about his favorite kind of sequence structure.
That is a very loaded question. So very similar to the way Mark does his sequences. As an agency, we have to adopt to many different types of workflows, right? So typically we do have an automated set of emails, about 6 to 8 sequences or steps going out. And we usually have 4 to 6 LinkedIn that's sprinkled in between to complement the emails, right? So, and among those steps, we also have call steps, because even though it's not Mark's preferred way, it does yield results. But, these are all depending on the industry, the total addressable market, the client, and what their specific needs are, because we personalize these campaigns. Now, our messaging style, again, it also we're quite flexible on our writing. We have different writing styles. I actually have a library of about 21 different writing styles for sales and marketing that just give kind of like a base to jump off of. But then the real power comes from the research. So our team really invests a lot of time when we're onboarding a new client on research, in-depth research. And that's to address, like Mark said, what's the real pain? People generally just won't pick up an email because there's features and benefits. More so, it's personalized for their own personal pain or what their struggle is, right? And so we try to really hone in on that over several messages, phone calls, etc. So I hope that answers.
It does. Thank you, Ed. Nick, do you have any thoughts on? I know it is probably a little bit too broad, but it's for me, it's interesting to see how these things are evolving. For instance, in the beginning of our journey here at Reply, we saw people mostly doing more than, I would say, 10 was average. More than 10 touch points. We saw that in the early days when sales automation was not such a well-defined space, and people reacted well to that. Now it's almost impossible sometimes to tell if a message that I'm receiving that talks about me, about my pain points, about the changes in my company. It's impossible to tell if it's AI automation or this is genuinely somebody reaching out to me. So that's what I'm usually looking for in a cold email myself, when I'm trying to understand, has that person spent at least 1 second checking me out personally, as opposed to just doing a bunch of automation. So from what I'm hearing, the number of touch points goes down, at least in my opinion, compared to even like 4 or 5 years ago. What are your thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and apologies for the late join. My wife and I are in the middle of a big move into our new house. So I'm actually in my parents' dining room right now. So just trying to handle all that. So apologies for that. And I hope everybody can hear me and see me okay.
No worries.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't need to go over what Mark and Ed just talked about, because I think they covered it pretty well. But the way that I think about this stuff, especially with the volume that has exploded in over the recent years, but then also specifically within the last year because of the AI stuff really accelerating it, is you have to think about your sequences or your you know, those sort of workflows as separate mousetraps, right? So a salesperson that's assigned to a lead is going to have their own mousetrap, which is going to be 6, 8, 10 touches. The marketing team, the company, is going to have its own mousetraps based off what the prospect does or what lists they get into. So you kind of have to think of the whole field and think about what's out there, and put that all into context, and then put yourself in the prospect's shoes, right? What are they going to respond to? What are they going to be most interested in? And also, what is not going to annoy them? Because you have a higher level of annoyance that people have because of just the sheer volume of outreach. So you have to really put that at top of mind. So I don't think about these as sort of a long, ongoing campaign. I think of them as short bursts around a specific topic or a specific need that you're trying to address, or specific message that you're trying to send out there. And then if you don't get a response, you put them to the side for a little while and then pick it back up again with some other campaign or some other thing. Whether it's a specific rep doing this or an overall team doing this, you kind of think about it the same way. So I just look at it as short bursts than I did maybe 5-7 years ago. 5-7 years ago, where it was just like one rep sending, you know, many touch points over a long period of time, like many months. I don't think you could do that anymore. You got to keep these things to 6 to 8 weeks and then wrap it up and then send them into something else.
All right. Thanks, Nick. I think the next one is probably to piggyback on the aspect of volume. And you know, volume versus automation versus scale, which is somewhat similar to a question we had for the first panel, but I think it's super relevant. In terms of even things like LinkedIn, what are the tactics, guys, that you employ in order to achieve that balance between maintaining the highest quality of outreach, which is typically manual, where a person can, you know, open a LinkedIn profile, check something out on their website, on their LinkedIn profile, on their company LinkedIn profile, and then say something genuine, versus, okay, but we also have to do that for, let's say, 3,000 people per month, because we have identified that, you know, as our kind of target. And especially because LinkedIn doesn't like you to automate stuff, quite frankly. So what are your recommendations as to how to maintain that balance between quality and scale? Sorry, let's start this time with Mark.
Hey, and sorry if my connection drops out ahead of time. So before I answer this question, I always like to speak to my clients and teach them that you can't sell car insurance to somebody who doesn't own a car. And where I'm going with this is that you need to make sure that your message is relevant. If your message isn't relevant to the prospect that you're reaching out to, then you're not going to get a reply. Adding in a line of personalization and then following that up with a non-relevant message, you're not going to get a reply. So with all of the campaigns that I work on, I actually don't focus on any sort of intro personalized message at all, or AI generated message. I go, if there's an observation that I can find for a trigger, which Vlad was sharing in the previous panel or talk, then I'll start with the observation. But if I can't find an observation, saying that, oh, I noticed that you went to this university, or, hey, you're human, you must breathe oxygen, now buy my stuff, which is what a lot of those lines come across as. So for me, it's really focusing on making sure that you do your research and your list building. And as Ed mentioned, that's a huge part of the process, which I'm sure Ed's customers or clients don't realize that of all the work that goes into the research side of things before a campaign can go out. But focusing on much smaller segments and lists of prospects that share a similar or common trigger or signal, and then messaging with a highly relevant message, which has nothing to do with their individual personality or what you can find on LinkedIn, can still get results. I typically see 13 to 17% replies. Some of those replies are a no or a maybe, or not right now, but I'm still getting those replies, which is helping from a deliverability point of view too.
Thanks, Mark. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, it's again, with all the automation tools, it's very hard to stand out on these on LinkedIn. And so I just try to keep it that place, manual and genuine as I can. And the way I think I found that this works best is showing up, responding or liking or commenting in your target's feed, like in their comments and things like that. So if somebody that you're targeting at a company gets promoted, you can maybe automate the alerts for that, not necessarily the outreach, right? So automate the alerts through the different tools that are out there about somebody having a job change, or they posted something or something like that, and use that as a trigger point to go and reach out to them and say, hey, congratulations, or hey, that's great news, and just to keep it top of mind. So then when you do want to send that message, or they decide that they have the demand, you're top of mind because you are commenting on something they care about, which is the content that they are putting out, right? So that's what I would focus on it as like a quick, tip with LinkedIn, separately from sort of all the playbooks and things that people run, is really just use it truly what it was meant to be, which is a social network, and be social with people and be active. And use that as a way to get your profile out there or increase the likelihood that somebody will respond.
Got it. Thanks, Nick. I'm especially interested to hear what Ed has to say, because Ed is with an agency, and agencies typically deal with large volumes. Mm-hmm. And even though we all know manual research, manual touch points are super effective, probably the most effective in these things, agencies have to work on a different scale. So, Ed, how do you maintain that? How do you maintain that human touch with, I'm assuming, tens or hundreds of thousands of people per month?
Yeah, it's it's definitely a balance for sure. So I did want to echo in on what both Mark and Nick said. Great strategies, right? There's nothing that's ever going to replace a personal touch, right? And that's when our SDRs really start working, is when we get that response, when we get to enter in our personal touch, right? But to scale, like you said, is a little bit different for an agency. And over the last 4 years, algorithms have changed exponentially. I think Google changes their algorithms somewhere between 500 to 600 times a year. And if you broke that down, that's like 2 times a day. The problem is the whole entire industry is saturated. We're no longer a blue ocean opportunity, right? It's a red ocean. But we have a lot of people that think it is a blue ocean because they haven't really been in the industry that long. And so it becomes saturated. And so to scale that, we have learned that, we can't send large volumes. 4 years ago, you could send 10,000 emails a month and you could just get results by numbers. But when COVID came around, everybody started working at home, things got saturated. So then people started, replicating that. And so that makes our algorithms get tighter. So why fight it, right? Go with the algorithm, do everything personalized, get it down to a science where you're digging in and actually finding out what people want. So when we scale, we've done a lot of research internally on all of our clients to find that, when we use a broad spectrum or a broad paintbrush whenever we're writing copy versus a narrowed industry specific, the quality, the response, the quality of response and the number of responses start to increase. And so when you scale that down to like a manageable level, so let's say we're only sending like 200-300 emails a week, but those emails are also personalized for a title, an industry, a specific problem, solution, and result, you can somewhat focus it down to where it's personalized and get people to answer. But again, you're still not going to be able to get that personal touch. So when it comes to us and our clients, we do a mix of everything. Like we do the short, small volume campaigns every week for our clients with multiple touches. But then we'll also go and hunt and find people. That's always going to be part of the process. And you could do this on a one-off basis. You can ask your client for like a top 10, like a wish list, and then your people can start connecting with them on LinkedIn, understanding and researching who they are, what kind of struggles they'll go through, and try to relate as a person, because at the end of the day, we're all just people, right? And so as for AI automation, to talk about a little bit of that, I mean, we don't use AI in our copy or anything like that, because you can definitely see when somebody says, you know, I hope this message finds you well. So we all know those emails, but that's our mix. That's how we find some sort of balance, is by trying to do all of it.
Super interesting. Actually, yeah. Typically, it's hard to not make these types of events that we're doing right now into promotion for AI technologies, so which it typically tends to become. But that was somewhat related to my next question, meaning what are the new, well, we call them channels, however you call them, technologies that you think are interesting, and maybe you like to maybe not rely on them as flagship channel, which I'm assuming everybody will agree, or maybe not, that the flagship channel is still an email, or maybe a link email closely followed by LinkedIn. But what are the emerging technologies, channels, be it AI or something very specific like using WhatsApp, for instance, for South America? Like, what are your favorites in terms of like where you thought, hey, this is interesting. I didn't realize this would be an efficient way to get to my prospect. Let's start with Nick this time.
Yeah. So it's interesting. What I've been spending a lot of time thinking about, and what we have, been doing at Close, is looking at the quote unquote traditional channels, because everybody has flocked to LinkedIn, email, the stuff that you can like really scale up and do big numbers with, and have started to move back to more of the traditional things. Like, depending on who you're selling to or what your market is or what have you, thinking as, maybe crazy, but thinking direct mail as a potential place, depending on the deal size. There's a lot of ifs with that, but thinking down that sort of train of thought of what are places that I can show up that my prospects are likely to be, to where I stay top of mind, or I'm reminded of when that email inevitably shows up in the inbox or in the LinkedIn, in-mail, right? So anything that you as a company can do to help your salespeople have a higher likelihood of being opened because they recognize the brand from other places that they've been, I think that's always, going to help. And it's impossible to track. That's the problem with this. But I think it does help and will go a long way. And because the entry point, the response point, is most likely always going to be, catching them on the phone, them responding to an email or in-mail or WhatsApp, whatever that sort of communication channel is. But the way to increase the likelihood of them responding is to work way higher up at the top of the funnel to make that happen at the bottom of the funnel, right? So, another interesting thing is, if you think about all of our media consumption behavior, is, a lot of us, are not watching cable anymore. We're watching on some streaming box, Roku or what have you. There's plenty of places where you can advertise on these, as an example, because a lot of people's attention and time is going there. So if you find something relevant there or on YouTube, they remember, you know what? When it lands in the email, I remember seeing an ad on this, or this is familiar to me. And they can pick that out of the 300 emails in their inbox from that day that is just from a bunch of people they don't recognize. So I've been trying to spend a lot of time helping my salespeople downstream get recognized in the inbox because they saw something higher up in the funnel. The email or the in-mail is not the first time that they heard about us.
All right, thanks, Nick. Ed, what's your stance on this?
Stance on AI as a tool.
I would say not necessarily AI. I think you've already mentioned you're not using AI in
I am.
Oh, you are. So you said you don't generate content in those emails, but in what ways are you using it?
That's a great question. The way we use it is, as you can imagine, if we're going to be doing in-depth research on a client, and let's say one person can have 2 or 3 clients, that's a lot of research. So we condense our research with AI. You can ask ChatGPT or Google Bard to give you qualitative statistics, look for pain, look for different things, right? Like what does the furniture industry, what kind of pain points does the furniture industry have from a logistics standpoint or something like that? And you can start breaking down what that total addressable market looks like, along with whatever your client has told you during your research, to really pinpoint the messaging. So AI is a good tool, but it has to be used properly. You know, there are a lot of people out there that just want to say, generate me an email. But what you should really be doing is generate the information I need so I can create a human-to-human contact with email. Does that make sense?
It does. Ed, do you guys at Martel Group, do you use any, let's say, non-standard, if you will, kind of touch points in the context of a sequence that are not often talked about? We all know about LinkedIn, email, and other social media. And in the context of LinkedIn, we're also talking about things like commenting, maybe just staying top of mind, as Nick was saying. But is there anything, and it's okay if there's nothing, but is there,
there's not really anything new. I mean, I would like to get more into SMS, but you know, if you're doing cold outreach, that's going to be really hard because you have to have their permission, right? So maybe implementing steps with text messaging after I've already started speaking with somebody to make sure they're going to make their meeting, right? No shows are 30%, you know, of booked calls, right? So we can reduce that with being proactive towards text messaging is something that I feel like we're going to start doing. But I think it's all about, you know, what kind of strategy. So if there are tools out there and you can find a good strategy to use it and stay within policy and procedures, then I mean, I'm open to hear it. So kind of curious what Nick's got to say.
Yeah, the question I was going to have for Ed and Mark actually was, I have been finding the AI tools, like let's use ChatGPT as the example, as being a tremendous time saver with sanity checking ideas, right? Like you had just mentioned, like the total addressable market, like you want to generate a lead list, right? And you think it's to this market or this set of people. Talking back and forth with GPT helps me arrive at the answer on, should I have people go do this or should I go do this, a lot faster than maybe the experience before. So it's saving me a lot more time in decision making on whether I should go pursue an idea or not. Not helping, and it doesn't help, or it is a bigger issue to try to help with the actual execution of the task. It's helping me figure out which tasks to prioritize and do. That's what I found the most help with these tools.
Mark, any thoughts on emerging, let's say, channels or tools or technologies that you started employing in your sequences?
Yeah, just thanks, George. Just go to Nick's point. Yeah, 100%. If you are using it to come and develop an idea, it's perfect. But you also need to have a certain level of knowledge to understand whether the answers are correct or not. So a lot of the training data that ChatGPT has been trained on, the most effective cold email in 2017 is no longer effective, yet that gets baked into writing those messages. So I'm with you there, Nick, of using it for ideation. A lot of the times when clients come to me and ask about AI and if we can use AI in their sales, I say, of course we can. But first of all, define your ideal customer profiles and personas in a succinct way. And they can't. And I think that's really where it comes back to. And this is a long-winded way of answering the question of what new channels and shiny objects. Essentially, it's the basics that are still working. The right message to the right people in the right medium. So I prospect where my prospects are. In most cases, that's email and LinkedIn. In terms of new tactics, if that's the question, using more rich media like voice notes and video in LinkedIn DMs is proving to be effective. I haven't done a large enough scale to work out, how much more effective that is, but I'm getting more replies or more people listening to my voice if it's a voice note, because all they get is this little blue bar with a white button that says play in the inbox, and that's very intriguing, even to the hardest of cold prospects.
Well, I can tell you that that's probably one of our top requests has been, and for quite a while here at Reply to include that capability. But there are some technical kind of challenges along with that. But that is very, I would say, highly demanded. With again, there are no hard data as of right now how it compares to other types of touch points. But there is definitely huge demand for that within sales organizations in companies. Unfortunately, we'll have to wrap up. If the speakers can dedicate a few more minutes to staying in the chats and answering questions that our audience has been asking, please do so. Again, very interesting conversation, tons of value. Thank you, everyone, so much. And let's move on with the next presentation. Olivia, are you here?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, George. Thank you, gentlemen. Really like your points on the new channels, basically mentioning the old new tactics like direct mail, which always work really good and unexpected. Before we move to the next presentation, a quick reminder, don't hesitate to ask your questions in the chat. We will make sure to ask the most interesting ones in the end of the presentation or address them in our content after the event. Now, I'm super happy to introduce our next speaker, Jimmy Kamadeka, founder at the SDR newsletter and Pitchfolio, to our virtual stage. Jimmy, thank you for joining us today. Please take it from here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Going to walk through a couple different things as it relates to cold email hacks that you can use to book more meetings. Now, there's a couple of different things to keep in mind here before we even get started that, what works now might not work a year from now. So these things are constantly changing. So it's important to stay up to date with what's working, what's not working, that type of stuff. So the things I'm going to talk about today are guides. What works for me also might not work for you, but I'm going to share a number of different examples that I've found success with, that other people have found success with. So there's a lot to come in this presentation. Another thing to keep in mind that you can take these examples and use them yourselves, but it's the underlying information that is really important. So if you don't know how to write a great email, you might not find the same success. So you have to understand the important aspects that go into creating an effective email for these things to work. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen here. Oh, hold on. Let's see here. All right. Can everybody see my screen here? I actually can't tell if it's working. Well, okay. Somebody can let me know if it doesn't work. So I'm going to get started here. But like I said, so, this is a presentation about, cold email hacks to book more meetings. So in this presentation, I'm going to walk through a couple of tips, a couple of things to keep in mind when you're sending cold emails. So before we even get started, couple things to keep in mind, just in terms of like the technical know-how. These types of things are very important when it comes to sending cold emails. So the first is that, don't send from your primary domain. So use some other domain. Make sure that you're not going to burn your primary domain and very much disrupt your business. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then in terms of volume, limit those daily email sending to about 40 emails per inbox. So many people right now are just sending so many emails from a single inbox. These spam filters are very, very sophisticated, and they're only getting smarter and they're only getting more effective. So 99% of the time, if you're getting very, very bad results, your emails might not be going to that primary inbox. So this is super important to keep in mind. Teams with that win the sales ops games, or teams that invest in sales ops, are going to be wildly more successful than teams that don't. So this is very, very important stuff. And then, warm up those inboxes, keep your bounce rate low. Again, very important. This is where high quality data does matter. So keep an eye on that. And then ultimately configure the technical settings on the back end. Very important. If you don't know how to do that, get somebody to help with it. It's very important. And then also just like little things like limiting the link tracking. That's going to help your deliverability. So make sure that you're doing everything possible to make sure that you end up in that primary inbox. So those are just some of the things. There's more to it, but we're going to move past this. Okay, so the most important part of writing an effective cold email is keeping it short. And this is so, so important. And so many people don't do it. So there's so much data out there from people like Lavender, SalesLoft, a number of other sales engagement platforms and other tools. They all say the same thing. Shorter emails are more effective. And so, ideally that the length that you want to be under is 50 words, but that's really, really hard. I'll share you a couple examples of emails that are under 50 words, but, ultimately I realize that's not going to be possible. So, shoot for that like 80 mark or below. But obviously, the numbers don't lie. The data doesn't lie. Shorter is better. So here's an example of what that might look like. This is for a tool called CallBlitz. Ultimately, it's a virtual sales floor for sales teams. It's a great tool if you want to go check it out. But this is a cold email that's 48 words. And as you can see, I have it being graded by Lavender right here. So also, if you don't use Lavender for your cold emails, definitely recommend that as well. But it's super simple here. So, hey, Bob, I see that your SDR team is remote. Would it be helpful if your reps didn't have to cold call alone? CallBlitz created a virtual sales floor to solve this. Dial as a team, listen together, learn from each other, and book more meetings. So super short email, but it covers all of the important parts. First off, we're starting off with something that we notice about them. This is something that's going to be the hook. It's going to bring them in. So I saw that your SDR team is remote. That's not a canned email. That's something that we noticed. And we could even get more specific than this. And I think that would actually improve this email quite a bit. But I'm going to get to that in a second. So again, short emails, very effective. This is just one example of one. The next example is actually an example I sent. So I run a recruiting agency right now. And this is an actual email that I sent that got a positive response that resulted in a closed one deal and has brought in a significant amount of revenue from that repeat business as well. So this is very straightforward again, and it's going to be another short email. So it says, hey, Rob, I saw your SDR job posting has been up for 12 days now and has 8 applicants. So that's a very specific first line. That's going to show them that this isn't a canned email. This is a email that is meant specifically for them. And then we can move on here. Like, need any help finding candidates in Houston? So again, this is a very specific email. This can't go out to everybody. This can only go out to specific people. We're in the age of AI right now. So sometimes, all you have to do is prove that you're not a bot to catch their attention. And this is an easy way to do it. So again, this email is 55 words. Like I said, this is a real email I sent. I got a positive response, booked the meeting, had the call, and won the deal. So that's just one example. So moving on. Automate the right things, but not everything. So again, like I said before, we're kind of in the age of AI right now, which is incredible. Like there are some amazing tools out there, but what we're finding is that it's almost becoming so easy to do cold outbound that people are just blasting everybody. So my inbox is full of this, where you can tell it's the fake personalization, the fake outbound. It's not an effective way to do it. So that's why I always say automate the right things, and things like research, the back end stuff that is setting yourself up for the outbound. And to go off of this a little bit, like according to SalesLoft, 4 out of every 1,000 emails are customized. And according to Lavender, those customized emails get 1,200% more replies. So it's a massive difference if you're customizing these emails. And sure, it might not be the easiest approach, but it is the more effective approach. We're not going for volume. You're going for positive responses back. So that's why it's so important. And there's a couple of things you might be thinking like, hey, this is going to take forever if I customize everything. And yeah, it probably will, but you don't have to make it that difficult. The way that I always structure this is by building sequences based on triggers and indicators, and then making those sequences very specific. So, there's a number of different ways that you can do that. They're going to be different for every company. But creating highly specific sequences is the path to creating high quality outbound that scales. So you might have like 10 different sequences with just slight adjustments, and then you can customize that first line of that email. And then you already have 2 points of differentiation at the sequence level, and then also in that email on the first line. So creating those sequences that are highly specific helps to scale that outbound. So it's very important to do that. And this is kind of going back to what I was saying before, is that it's so important to be as specific as possible. Nowadays the battle is proving that you're not a bot. You have to be catching their eye with something specific. And again, this doesn't have to take long. This can be just in your first line of the email. Like the example I gave before is, I saw your SDR job posting has been up for 12 days and has 8 applicants. That's specific. It's nothing out of the ordinary. A bot maybe could do that, but it's going to take a lot of custom fields, a lot of work to even set that up. And that didn't even take long to do, because all I had to do was look up, okay, like how long has this been up for? How many applicants do you have? And then we can quickly scale that. So if I already have a specific sequence that's targeting SDR teams with more than 5 SDRs that are hiring in Texas, that's already pretty specific. And then if I add one more level of customization to that first line, we're already in a great place. And that doesn't take long. Like I said before, all I had to do was look up how long the job posting has been up and how many applicants there are. So that's really easy. And okay, moving on to another example here. So a bad example of this would be like your templated approach, where it says like, looks like your team is growing. Sure. I mean, it might be growing, but that looks like a bot sent that. So a better example of that would be like, looks like your team is growing with the additions of Bob and Lisa. Much harder to automate. So if I, as a hiring manager or somebody on the receiving end of that cold email, that's going to catch their attention. If you're name dropping somebody that's on their team, that's very important. So just being specific in examples already in itself is a huge differentiator. And you don't even have to have that many different points of differentiation in an email. But that first line is really going to be the hook that's going to get them to keep reading. And ultimately, that's the goal. So the second example here is, I saw your team is publishing ebooks. And then, a better example of that would be like, I saw your team published a white paper on cold emailing strategies. So that's, again, one simple way that you can customize the email from the start. It's not going to be something that takes a lot of research, but if you already have a bunch of people in a sequence that are publishing ebooks or white papers, something like that, all you have to do is just name drop one of them in it. That's going to stand out far more. And all you have to do with that is just go to their website, click one thing, and you've already got your answer there. So again, highly segmented sequences, add one level of customization on top of that, you already have a compelling email. So that's just one way that you can do this and do it at scale. Here's an example of that. So this is for Trellis. It's an AI cold call coach. again, great tool. If you aren't familiar with them, go check them out. But the first line here, you're growing the SDR team at Acme. Saw you added Bob and Emily last month. Right there. You've already name dropped somebody that's on their team. So if I was a hiring manager and I saw this, you're talking about people on my team, I'm going to pay attention to that. And I will say this is very similar to an email I got when I used to be an SDR manager. I actually received an email like this, and it really stuck with me and caught my attention. So now I use this in my own outreach when I'm talking to hiring managers and doing outbound myself. Like, this type of stuff matters. So a super easy way to do it. And I'll share this deck with all these examples in it. So you guys have this. Again, I'm using Lavender to grade it. Another great tool if you haven't checked it out. But that's an easy example right here. And this is okay. So the next point here, I think, is so important, and it drives me nuts because so many people don't do it, and it's so easy to do. Is just simplify the language that you're using. So often times, newer sales reps and more inexperienced sales reps, they think they have to impress their prospects, and so what they do is they use so much corporate jargon. They use so many words that prospects don't use on a day-to-day basis. Your prospects are skimming your emails very quickly. They're getting bombarded. So if you're using all these long, complicated, jargony words, people are just going to skip right over it and miss it. So one of the most effective things that you can do is just simplify your language. It's not a complicated process. And this is one of the things that you can use, ChatGPT to help out with. And there's a number of different AI tools that can help with this. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you want to simplify your language. Emails written at a lower grade reading level have significantly higher responses than more complicated emails. So I always say, speak to communicate, not to impress. And if you stand by that throughout all of your messaging, you'll have far better results on your cold emails. And you can also take this into cold calls as well. When you are speaking with somebody on the phone, simplify the language. Just speak to communicate. And then, so this one's one might be a little bit controversial, but use images. So obviously, like, this is going to hurt deliverability. So you have to be careful about how and when you choose to use this. But there's a significant amount of data that shows that humans process visuals much faster than text. So sometimes it's better to give a visualization of what you can do, like a before and after. And an effective way to do that is to create visualizations. I'm sure your marketing team has something like this. If they don't, you can make one yourself. But again, it can hurt deliverability. So use it strategically. Use it maybe with your higher priority prospects, people who have engaged with you before. Those are the type of people that I recommend doing this with, because it just has it has a far greater impact. So here's an example I actually found from Josh Braun. If you don't follow Josh Braun, he puts out tons of amazing content. So this is an example for phone ready leads. Ultimately, phone ready leads is going to help you increase your connection rate on cold calls. So the email is simple. It's, looks like your SDRs are cold calling director of benefits. What are you doing to increase your connect rate? 1,800 plus SDRs are having 8 to 12 conversations to schedule 1 to 2 meetings for every 50 outbound dials. No new tech. So on. But as you can see, the visualization here is pretty powerful. You have, a significant amount of red dots on one side, and then you have a significant amount of green dots on the other side, indicating meetings. So this image is going to be processed far faster than, a series of emails. So something to keep in mind as well. Again, like I said, be strategic about how you use this, because this isn't something that you're going to want to blast out to every one of your prospects, because you're really going to hurt your deliverability then. But it's super important when it comes to how to process a message. So moving on. So use data from third parties. So if your company has significant amount of white papers, emails, case studies, that stuff it comes from a very biased source. So you are trying to sell something. Prospects know that. So one of the ways you can get a little bit more credibility is by using a third party. So for example, if I was selling a tool all about email deliverability, I might cite a source from like Mailshake or something like that, a different source that is providing the same information, and where we share a common goal. Because ultimately at the end of the day, like as a seller, you are a biased source. And sometimes it's important to acknowledge that as well. So anytime you can have a third party validate that, very important. And that's only going to work in your favor. So that's something to keep in mind. And here are a couple of other just miscellaneous tips. And I think one of the top ones here is the most misunderstood one, where it's subject lines. It always comes down to subject lines, and people want to be selling in the subject lines. They want to be convincing in the subject line. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you do that, you're going to look like every single other company that's out there that's trying to sell you something. So one of the most effective way to do this is ultimately create boring subject lines. So for example, if I'm reaching out to SDR teams, maybe I just make my subject line cold calls, SDR teams, remote team, things like that, that are related to the overall email, but aren't trying to sell you anything. The people at Lavender call this internal camouflage, which is, I think, a great way to describe it. Because again, if I was an SDR manager and I see somebody talking about cold call connection rate, that type of stuff, I'm going to click on that email because it's related to my job. It's related to my team. These are things that I care about and I'm talking about every single day. So super important there. Avoid the persuasion in the subject lines. Avoid the selling in the subject lines. Just get them to open the email. That's all. That's the entirety of what it's about. The next one here is interest-based CTAs work really well. You don't always have to ask for time. Time is a finite resource. There's only so much time in a day. However, interest is not, whether somebody's interested or whether somebody's not interested. So that's why I always aim to spark a conversation. Ultimately, I'm just trying to get the reply back, because once you get one reply back, it's far easier to get another reply back, because that shows that you've piqued their interest in some sort of way. So these CTAs can be super short, like worth a chat, sound interesting, any interest here, like that type of stuff works to start conversations. And that ultimately is going to be your goal. So that's super important there. Another important part here is one value prop per email. Going back to the beginning of what I said, keep emails short. Like that is, if you could take away one thing from that, it would be this: keep emails short. And part of that is including one value prop per email, which is just another way to help make sure that your emails aren't getting super long. You don't have to sell every single piece to every single part of your solution to everybody. Include one value prop per email. It's going to help create your emails, or help keep your emails much shorter, and it's going to make them much clearer. So that is ultimately some of the hacks that I've come up with to book some more meetings. So if you guys have any questions, definitely add me on LinkedIn. I will try to respond to everybody that reaches out. It might take me a little bit. And sign up for the SDR newsletter. Every week we share very tactical, very actionable content. We love examples. We love sharing real life examples. As you can see in the number of examples I shared in this presentation. It's only once a week on Tuesdays. Be on the lookout for it. And let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm always happy to respond to everybody.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. We basically have one question from Johnny Hayek. A few people responded in chat, but I think we definitely need your opinion on that. What is the best practice when prospects start ghosting you?
So I'm assuming this means as an SDR, I'm thinking from an SDR standpoint. So I'm assuming you mean like you've talked to somebody and they're like, yeah, I'm interested in meeting. And then they ghost you. Ultimately, it's going to have to be figuring out what happened. Did something change on their end? I love ultimately, the Chris Voss approach of just being like, have you given up on this project? It might be a little bit overused now. So they might be getting hit up with that many times, but ultimately don't hold on to those people too long. The best possible thing you can do is just have a healthy pipeline from the top and not have to rely on those types of people who are ghosting you. If that's what you're referring to when it comes to an SDR standpoint. If you're talking from more of a closing role, there's going to be different approaches to that, but that's how I would approach that.
Yeah, I like it. Thank you so much. And another question from my side. I really like your point on personalization and how it actually helps to um, improve the open and reply rates. What about AI personalization? What's your attitude to that? And basically, I encourage everyone who is watching us online to put your thoughts on AI personalization in chat, because this is a kind of very hot topic in sales development right now. But different people have, well, of course, different opinions on whether it's really practical and really applicable to the automated sales engagement process.
Yeah, I really struggle with this because I there's so much value in AI, but at the moment, I struggle with it when it comes to using AI for outreach. Like I said before, I think it's great for automating a lot of the back end work to set yourself up for success. But when it comes to writing an effective email, I really think that that personal touch is very important with that. So I say automate the back end stuff. And then if you do it successfully, you're going to create a situation where you have to do way less work up front in the actual outreach process when you're writing emails. So it's getting there. I think at the moment, though, we're not at a point where you can fully rely on AI. I think it's going to be wildly important to become a great writer, so you can determine if what the AI is giving you is even good. So ultimately, it's going to go back to those foundational skills.
Got it. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for doing this presentation today. It's full of insights and everyone really enjoyed. Thank you so much. And we are moving forward with our next speaker. Let's get more hands-on with cold outreach tactics and analyze a few real sequences to source some valuable key takeaways on what makes them so effective. To do that, I'd like to invite our next expert, Jill Bruno, Senior Manager at Rocket Reach with Sequence Teardown Workshop. Happy to welcome you here today, Jill.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me, Olivia. I'm very excited to be here today. All right. Can everybody hear me? Good. All right. So today we are going to be talking about a sequence teardown. So I did create a presentation that I'm going to run everybody through, and I hope you enjoy it. All righty. This is the presentation, sequence teardown. So let's start off. Who am I? Why is it worth your time to listen to me today? So I'm Jill Bruno. I have been in the SDR space for nearly 10 years. I started out as an SDR and I always knew that was going to be my path. So I was about 5 years as an individual contributor and I am 5 years into management. I'm a 2-time demand-based top woman in sales, leader, mentor, advisor, mom. I have had the opportunity to build 3 SDR teams from scratch. SMB, mid-market, enterprise, international, PLG, you name it, I've done it. And my passions include speaking to folks like you today, podcasts, webinars, and any ways that I can continue to pay it forward, which also tails into some of my career goals. And I always like to share a fun fact about me. So I'm kind of a goofball. And I was out one day with friends at a parade, and we ran into Jason Siegel, who, if you guys are familiar with him, he is one of the lead roles in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, How I Met Your Mother. So I was a little starstruck and I just got really excited. So I ran up to him and started singing a song from Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And I was just a complete goofball, but I don't know, it was such a great memory. So that's my fun fact. All right. Let's get started. Let's jump right in. So I'm going to talk about some inbound sequences. Most of this is going to be focused on outbound sequences, but for this example, I chose to do inbound. So when I first started writing sequences many years ago, it could be a little daunting of where to start. What do you actually do? How do you know when you should have a call versus an email versus a LinkedIn step? Like, where do you begin? And I found a lot of value in writing it out. Before it gets mushed into your head, put pen to paper. If you're in an office, even if you print it out, that could be helpful. I happen to make this in Excel, but go day by day. Put yourself in the prospect's shoes so that way you can manage a professional sequence as opposed to something that may come off harassing or seem a little too heavy. And you also have to consider the weekends. So if I know a lot of times sequencing tools, it's X days later, X minutes, however you set things up, you have to keep in mind that how is it going to fall during the business days and not on the weekends? And I just find that a visual is really, really helpful. And then you can also see how are you starting week 1, week 2, week 3, and then have your total steps. So again, for beginners, I think this is a really good first step to figure out that visual of how you want to do it. All right, let's dive into some things that you always want to do. And I just want to call out, forgive me, I'm looking at my monitor. It's really, really small on the screen ahead of me. So I apologize if you're getting some of the side of my face. I just want to make sure I could read my words. um, what to always do. You need to establish a goal for your sequence. Is it to book a call? Is it to book a meeting, a qualifying meeting? Is it to have a demo scheduled? Is it a meeting to gain a referral into the company or to maybe another customer or client? Maybe you're trying to gain registration. This could be whichever intentions are best for your efforts, but you need to establish a goal because that's what you're going to bake into your CTA, your messaging, and what you're asking them to do. So if you don't have a goal, then I would take a pause before even trying to write any messaging or steps from the calendar example that I gave. And you always have to focus on value. What is in it for them? Beyond using the words verbatim, I'm going to save you time and money. I can't tell you how many emails I get that say that. That's great. That's what most tools are out there to do, but I need proof. I need to know what's in it for me because time and money is going to be subjective unless you're going to follow up with those details. So make sure there is value beyond that statement. And I give an example because I'm going to focus a lot on for Rocket Reach. That's where I work. We are a contact data provider, and we're being very successful with our product-led growth motion because we get so many users that come our way that's what I'm going to focus on. So just to avoid any confusion, but an example could be like, hey, there's better packages available. I want to make sure that you're not getting hit with overages because you've exhausted how many lookups you were able to get. That's more value in it for them. And also, when you're personalizing, be meaningful. I just listened to your podcast about ABC and I loved your take on outbound strategies. And I heard you talk about some contact data challenges. Did you know that Rocket Reach does X, Y, and Z? Loop in that personalization to relevancy of your product. It can't just be, hey, I noticed you went to college here. Woohoo, buy my product. It's not relevant. And know your audience. Are you speaking to an inbound lead who is anticipating you to reach out? Who probably they should know what your product is, what they do. They should be prepared with questions. You can take control of that much easier. But if it's outbound, are they trying to get you off the phone? They might not be expecting your phone call. Maybe you're really catching them out of the blue. But keep that in mind for how you're going to come across in your sequences, both verbally and in your written communication. And also take note of your ICP. Are you calling somebody who is at their desk? Somebody who has an environment where they are in front of their computer, they're next to a phone, and they're pretty stationary. Or is your ICP somebody who they're out in the field? Maybe they work on homes and they're never in an office, but they're running a really profitable business from their truck. Keep that in mind for how you want to communicate with them because even LinkedIn, as an example, some people are on LinkedIn, some people have never even heard of the tool. So you really just need to know where they're at during the day so that way you can make those connections and increase your engagement. And again, that goes with the hours that they're also working. And then use data to improve. You always, always want to do this. So when are your connections happening? That could also help determine sequence lengths. And I'll give an example of some people feel like, oh, you need to have X weeks across a month and this and that. How do you know? I can speak from my team. I know that we make most connections on the third sequence step. And for our inbound that I was referencing, that's day 1. So it wouldn't be beneficial for me to drag my team out, 10 more weeks in following up when I know 75% of our connections are within the first 3 steps. So keep that in mind if you're getting a little confused about how long you should actually do it. You need the data to tell you. And A/B test everything: subject lines, messaging, CTAs, and check your email sentiment. I know I use Outreach, so that's the tool that I can speak of, but I'm able to go through all the replies and objections, what was positive, identify, was your messaging off? Let the data tell you. Maybe you had the wrong target. Let the data tell you. Or maybe you were using bad data. You have so many data points that can just help you improve, but you're not going to see that improvement unless you're taking a look. Okay, now, what to never do. Hi, prospect. My name is Jill. I'm an SDR contacting you from Rocket Reach. Hope all is well. Cringe. Do not introduce yourself. If they have a brain, they will see your name and your email address. They will see in the signature. There's so many ways for that prospect to know who you are. You only have so many words to make that connection. Don't waste it introducing yourself. And also, I hope all is well. Do you? Probably not. Cut it. Cut it out, especially when this is your first contact attempt. To be clear, if you have rapport with somebody, if maybe you're an account manager and it's a customer that you know fairly well, that's where I think it is more appropriate. But cut all of that noise when it is an outbound sequence that with a person you're trying to connect with for the first time. And also, think about LinkedIn. How many times have you gotten a LinkedIn message or email or an email that says, I came across your profile and was really, impressed by your experience? That's so generic. What are you impressed by? As Sam Sells would say, show me you know me. And that's just so generic. So you want to avoid all of that. And also, these are my own opinions, so I should have started with that. But as far as bump emails, any thoughts? That's not helpful. Bringing to the top of your inbox. Did you see my last note? In some ways, that could almost insult your prospect. So I would cut all of that. If you don't have anything relevant to focus on, don't do it. As well as when you're writing your messages, make sure that you really look at that sequence so that way you can bring relevancy to every single message. Don't top load everything into your first email with every point, because then that's going to be less fuel for you to fire off in future emails. So that'll cut out all that bump email noise. And also spam trigger words. I know you guys can see here, there's a lot of obvious ones. Do a quick Google search. There are so many resources that will pull up a list for you. Listen to it, because more than ever, the challenges that sales professionals, SDRs have, Google. Everything you're sending is going into spam. Google is tightening those bolts more than ever. All these email platforms, they don't want spam coming in, and many times you can look like spam. Avoid the words that are going to hit those filters. And even with phone connections, a lot of numbers are coming up as spam. You need to be conscious of all of that, because, manage what's in your control, because there's nothing worse than wasting your time for emails into spam. It could be the best email ever. Doesn't matter if it's not going to land in that inbox. Also, don't show up and throw up. Don't just focus on you and your company and your product. This person, you're going outbound to them. They don't know and they don't care yet. You have to give them a reason to care, back to the what's in it for them, before you even focus on the features that you have. Nobody cares. And then also, like I mentioned, the irrelevant personalization. If the personalization doesn't tie into a product, scratch it. And keep in mind, a good rule of thumb, no pun intended, is 2 finger swipes on a phone is a good length for an email. All right, 10 C's for an effective email. So I'm not going to go through all the definitions here just for the sake of time, but you want to make sure your email is clearly written. It's concise. Is your email complete? Is it correct? Is it considerate? Is it credible? And this is actually one I will talk about. Make sure that it's credible and it's something that could be believed. If you are sending an email that you're going to, have an SDR team book 10,000 more meetings per month, like, you're going to have people that call BS. So make sure that it is credible and you're not overinflating things just to get attention on your message. Is it courteous, conversational, concrete, and coherent? So think of these 10 C's and ask yourself that as you are writing some sequence steps. Okay, so inbound email. Just going to focus on this for a few slides and then we will get to outbound. So this is a good example of email 1. You can see, and this is taken from my outreach instance. You can see our A/B tests that we had. We had 5 running at, different points in time. You can look at the open rates. We don't really have links, so that's why clicks are 0, but the replies, I turned off the bottom 2 because, yeah, the open rates are pretty great, but look at how substantially lower those replies are than the above. Why would I waste any more precious emails going to folks that will have a better chance of replying with those top 3? So that's just something to keep in mind of when you should turn it off, when you see a big difference from that. And let's break down. This was, an email that had 32% replies. I'm calling out previous attempts for relevancy that I have been trying to reach you. It's a glimpse at the company and the value and the size of the database that we offer. And it also seeks confirmation that that's actually what they need before booking, because we experience it all the time. We do get inbound leads and they're actually not looking for a tool at all for what Rocket Reach provides. So just getting that confirmation so that way we're not wasting time in the event that they need something that we just don't offer. Sometimes people get confused, but that's what stood out for the 32% replies. And for the 4.3, that was actually an AI generated one that we were testing. You can see it's pretty unclear what our company even does. There's a huge lack of value. And it's really just an immediate push to scheduling a phone call. So that's confusing. Why would they reply when they're not sure what the heck we do? So again, keep all of this in mind, back to those 10 C's when you're trying to make the impact that you guys are working so hard for. And take advantage of your sequencing tool. There are so many amazing tools out there, and they're going to dive into some of the data that you need to use to be successful. So again, from the inbound perspective, this is just a small sample of the 66 replies. 65% of that was positive, and then about 17% was objections. So as, an SDR or as a manager, let's see why. This isn't live links, is just screenshots, but if you go, you can see, okay, the positive, most were willing to meet, some needed more information. Let's identify the information that is a most common trend, so maybe you can avoid that and get better with some A/B tests. And then alternatively, for objections, so when it's no reason or not the right person, the no reason, that's typically something a bit more ambiguous that outreach wasn't able to hone in onto one of the other topics, but look into what those are. Not the right person could be unusual since it's an inbound lead, but maybe that's a good opportunity to go outbound. If you got somebody who wasn't the right person, but you were able to extract pain points, you better be finding every decision maker in that company and, going after them because you have some information about their use case. And then, bad timing, set a task for the future and do your due diligence to try to, capture that when you can. Use the data. All right, let's get to the good stuff, outbound. So this is all snippets of our PLG motion, which, to be transparent, we have been really aggressive with this throughout the year, and we're constantly A/B testing the best way to go after it, who we should be going after, so many different versions. So for the sake of this is just one of the many A/B tests that we have running, but I wanted to call out things that I've noticed that went well. And I'm also going to call out to all of you guys things that didn't go as planned, because the truth is, I wanted to be intentional that you have to learn to fail. If everything always works, if everything is always perfect, that's all that you know. When you learn something that didn't work and then you're able to scale beyond that and do better next time, that's the strength in your professional career. So I was very intentional about picking this one. But similar to what I showed you with the inbound, I scratched the bottom. Look, 0 replies. I don't have time for that. This is an outbound where every touch matters. So lowest opens, lowest replies, clear enough, turn that email off. And let's look into the difference. So starting with the 7.9% replies, this is calling out the company usage. I'm bringing relevancy into that where this individual may not be aware of because they weren't a user themselves. And I'm also calling out limitations. That's the gap of what they have versus an ideal future state of what they could have. So I'm really intentional about that. And also the value of what they're missing out on due to the limitations and within the products that they've signed up for. They may not know that something is bigger and better, which is the best suited product for them. And also, it's a soft CTA. It's a question about interest. It's not going to be overly pushy, like, hey, schedule a demo. Outbound takes longer to bake. So I was using terms is this worth exploring instead of, hey, book time with me now. And then when we look at the zero reply, it's actually all about Rocket Reach. This is accolades. It's not speaking to the prospect. And the CTA is, let's have a walkthrough. So they probably feel like we're selling to them. We boasted a little bit too much here. The replies in the data told us that's not the way that we have to go. All right, and now this is going to be the second email. So this is going to be a reply to whichever A/B test they received from that first round that I showed you. So we're testing two different things here. So the one to the left, that's where we're trying to test common pain points. It is a softer approach because for my industry that we sell contact data, a lot of the use cases are pretty similar. So that's where I really can speak to that generalized, hey, this is what you're probably struggling with because I hear the same 5 reasons every single day. And then the other side that we were testing is it is more of a push based on usage and it is a little more aggressive. So as we, again, continue to test our PLG motion, we're trying to see both sides of the spectrum of what's going to hit and at what points in the sequence and messaging and the duration of follow-up. So these are two very different approaches. All right, email 3. So it's funny, I use this subject line question about company because I got baited into that. Maybe that's the wrong word, but this one company was prospecting me and they kept emailing me, question about Rocket Reach. So in my head, I'm like, this is a sales prospect. They have a question about our product. Let me jump in. And then when I opened the email, I was like, oh, you got me because I was so interested to read that email. And then they got my attention and I did read it. We weren't a product fit, but I've had some success there, and it's just a good way to catch those email opens. So for this one, they're pretty neck and neck as far as opens and replies. We're still running this, but we're trying to increase the replies, of course. So again, the left side, that's where we're choosing to focus on challenges and the impact at a wider use case. And then the other side, it's challenges and impact, but it's more details about how we support our customers. And for everybody on here, I know I'm going a little quick for the sake of time here, but I want to make sure that I can get this presentation to you so I can work with reply on the side. So that way you guys can dive into this, or even if you guys want to find me on LinkedIn, it's just Jill Bruno. I'm happy to give you guys as many examples as possible so you can scale up your sequencing if in the event this is just too quick or not enough for you guys to read through everything. Okay, email number 4. So this is something that's worked really, really well because again, my audience is somebody who came to Rocket Reach and our website. They signed up for free, and that gives them 5 free emails. It doesn't give them phone integrations. It's truly a test of check a couple emails, see what our UI looks like, see how easy it is to use, check out the filters, see what we're capable of. So that way, you're going to want more credits. 5 is not enough to be successful. So this is where I'm leveraging in that 4th email. Hey, would playing around with more credits, be helpful for your Rocket Reach experience? And then that's where I'm able to get them on the phone, get their engagement, see what they're using. I can, negotiate how many credits would be appropriate without it being too much of a hit on our side. But this is a way that really catches people's attention because I'm extending an offer and that value that maybe they just haven't seen yet because of the limitations within their package. And then email 5. So there's so many ways you can have your breakup email. I have seen some people who are adamant about being stern, calling out, hey, you ignored me. I reached out to you for a reason. And it's a little more cocky. And it really does work sometimes, but it's trying to pull out the emotions of the individual by saying, listen, I tried, you ignored me. I didn't take that approach here. I eased into a softer approach saying, hey, listen, I must have missed the mark in your journey. Assuming timing isn't right, let me know if things are, become interested in a data validation because I want to prove it to you when you're ready. So again, that's my last offer extended that I am still willing to do something for you. Balls in your court at this point. So that is a pleasant breakup email, as I like to call it. But it could also, like I said, be worth A/B testing, something a little bit more stern by saying, you did all this, they didn't reply, or even ask why. Sometimes people get really great success in saying, why haven't you replied? And sometimes that honest truth is what's going to make a really good impact for you to get better in the future. Okay, so back to your sequencing tool. You want to look through all of the data that you have. So this is going to be the objections for outbound. They have a solution. They're not the right person. If they have a solution, maybe they need another one. I'm fortunate to be in an industry where most often people have 2, sometimes 3 data providers. So there's ways to come across that objection without just saying, okay, bye. Dive into those emails. Not the right person. Okay, you're going after the wrong users potentially. So that's a good learning of where you should be pivoting or asking for referrals, because there's nothing worse than wasting time going after somebody who can't buy. Again, I know the other reasons I said, those could be a bit more miscellaneous. Same with no reasons, but that's typically just kind of those hard no's or kind of funky answers that you can't really, again, place into a bucket. And then again, also the positive information. 50% of that bucket what needed a little bit of information, and then others were willing to meet. Like I said earlier, what information do they need? Maybe in email 1 or 2, you can throw in links to your website, CTAs. You can throw in a case study that would really help reduce some of this. But again, you're not going to know if you're not going to dive into each. And something that I wanted to share that I learned from this motion is it actually wasn't about the email content. It really didn't matter because our learning is we were targeting the wrong people. So that's something I want to call out is take a look and be serious about the data you have, because we did realize through the objections, positive and the negative objections, we were going after the wrong people. So that was a really good learning. And I wouldn't have known that if I wasn't hands on working with my team to make sure that we were using the data. I know I'm saying that a lot, but I'm saying it on purpose. A sequence isn't going to improve or get better if you are not, again, striving towards making it better each and every day. And then another thing I want to call out is a heat map. So this isn't always going to work depending on who you go after, because for as an example, if you do US and international, the international calls you have to place in the morning. So that could delay some of your US calls. You don't have an opportunity to call them their morning if you're working in the US. So with that in mind, but it's still good to note, like this is saying, okay, Thursday between 8 and 9 a.m., we had a 40% answer rate. So then that's a way for my team. Let's dive in and look and see, because if that's going to be when a power hour is, they know that's going to be a really fruitful time to get folks on the phone. You don't want to do it 5 o'clock on a Friday. People are tapped out and hopefully headed to a fun weekend, but this is going to always look different and it's also going to change. So just go into your tool and see when are really good times for power hours, because you want to make sure you're going to increase those connect rates. Okay. And any questions? Is there anything in the chat anybody wanted to talk through? I went a little quick, but I'm excited we have some extra minutes here.
Sure. Thank you so much for your presentations. I really enjoyed the insights of both inbound and outbound emails. And before we go to questions, I really like the comments. When you mentioned this never to do tips, like hope my email finds you well. I really like the comments from Majid Hassan. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing the name
good.
correctly. Yeah, thank you. So the comment is, early in my SDR stint, I received a reply once saying, if all was well, I wouldn't be getting all these unsolicited templated emails. Really like that. It's just so to the point.
Yeah. And I hate when people get rude too. There's nothing that grinds my gears more than when people are rude to SDRs, because just ignore them. If you're not interested, that's fine. But yeah, sometimes people can get a little sassy, but it's all right. We have thick skin. That's why we're in sales.
Yeah, but that's challenging, to keep energized, to stay engaged. When you receive a lot of no's during the day.
Absolutely. And that's why this role is not for everybody. And that's okay. You need thick skin. You need to be on your toes. You need to be able to handle your objections. And it's okay if, like I said, you recognize within yourself that you need to walk away. But the best advice that I can give to you on the really hard days, or that frustrating email call, or anything that you're facing, is take a step back, take a deep breath, and remember from that situation, what can you control and what can you not control? Because you can craft the perfect email, you can place your phone calls, you can do what's in your control. You cannot control how somebody reacts to that effort. And you can also control how you react to their reaction. So if somebody's going to be rude and going to be nasty, I know this is easier said than done. Do not let it get to you. Do not question your worth. Do not give yourself imposter syndrome. You truly have to remember it's probably them. Maybe they're having a really rough day. Maybe you caught them after a life experience or a tragedy. You just don't know. And people sometimes think these cold callers that we're not real people. And I'll actually speak of it to not name dropping, but there was this viral LinkedIn post last week that made me sick. An individual took to Twitter to screenshot the worst profanity in reply to a cold email to the point this person told the SDR, I hope you get cancer and die. It was horrible. I couldn't believe a human being reacted to a cold email as such, but they were trying to, clearly they were caught at a bad time and their excuse was, I thought it was a bot and not a person. I don't think you should tell bots that either, but this poor, SDR, I'm sure that was hard for them, but it's not your fault. That's their problem. So don't ever let somebody's behavior impact you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I hope your advice keep inspiring a lot of people on this conference listening to us.
Yeah. And you just have to keep trying. Even one other little tidbit I'll give you for, objection handling, which, sorry, I'm segueing away from sequence teardown here, but one thing I always challenge you to master is for every scenario that you get for your objections and write them down, have a quick answer for that's exactly why I called. Oh, hey, Jill, it's not me. I don't handle that. No, that's exactly why I called. I'm calling because you use the tool yourself. So I really want to learn about your experiences. Just be quick on your toes, and I guarantee your confidence will go up with that is exactly why I called. And it's also a pattern break. People don't expect that. They expect, oh, okay, bye. Nope, that's exactly why I called. So that's my challenge for you. Master that objection.
Love it. Thank you so much. We have questions. I'm not sure if we'll be able to cover them all online, but I kindly ask you, Jill, probably to stay a little bit longer and answer those questions in chat.
Sure. I don't see them. Should I have access?
That's okay. I'll be
Okay.
that's part of my role here. So first question from Vlad Mazur. What mean A/B test for Jill?
What is an A/B test?
Yeah, for you specifically.
Like if you want to prospect me?
Yeah,
You mean?
what is what do you mean? Like, what is the best practice by you for A/B
Okay.
testing your emails?
Okay, so you want to test a couple things, but you want to isolate it to one test. So you don't want to have 5 things going because you're not going to know what is increasing or decreasing the success. So one A/B test could be your ICP. Maybe you're going after a very specific title, and that's going to be your test. So maybe you want to run a couple campaigns of, I'm making it up. Maybe one is director level in this industry and then VP level in that industry, but you want to isolate that. And then it could also be what your CTA is. One example is that softer messaging that I was saying, which was, you know, is this of interest? And then maybe another A/B test is you really pushing like, hey, let's schedule a demo. So you have to pick one piece. And then, like I said, use that data, and then that's where you could find it. So whether you A/B test with one entire sequence or just within those templates, just stick to one path. And also don't edit your A/B tests. I know it's so easy to be like, you know what? Let me tweak this sentence. Don't do it. Turn it off, copy and paste it, make your tweaks and start over. But like I said,
Thank you.
focus on one thing.
So good. Thank you so much. Another question. So when dealing with sequences, if it's automated messaging, how can those emails not sound robotic and more personalized, customized, specific, especially in bulk and on maybe the third or fourth email?
So you have to be careful with this because this sounds a little bit like spray and pray. And you want to be careful because if you're doing mass generic automated messaging, I guarantee that you will get shut down. So you don't want to compromise your domain, your email health. And like I speak from experience because we're a new sales team, our Gmails have gotten shut down a lot this year because we didn't warm them up properly. Lesson learned. But if you are in a situation where you don't need as much one-to-one personalization, but you can speak to the personalization of that person, which we have seen success in because our use case is very similar. You want to speak to, if you know you sell to sales professionals. All right, I'll use Rocket Reach. We sell to sales professionals because they need accurate phone and email to go outbound. So the challenges that they face are typically price with another provider, inaccurate data, or they want to test us before they buy. So I can speak to a couple of those reasons, and that way it should still resonate and hit with them. And then you can also take advantage of variables. Don't overdo it, because one example is if, say, you want to pull in their company name and it's, say, lowercase, or their first name, make sure that it's the clean data, because good data in is good data out. But I would loop that in when you can, so that way it doesn't seem so mass generated. But again, just be cautious. You don't want to send more than, I would say 10 to 15 for the same domain. 15 might even be pushing it. And if you are fresh and warming up your inbox, only start with 30 per day. You have to scale up slowly because you will get shut down, and it's tough.
Got it. Thank you so much. And there is a second question from the same person, Brian Edwards Jr. In terms of responding, how long should an SDR spend time on constructing a response? Is it it's obvious that time matters because of the sensitivity of engagement interest. I want to avoid the ping pong game and get to booking the demo as soon as possible while gathering and addressing as much information as possible.
You just answered your own question. So follow your gut. You just said you want to book a demo. Use words to lead to that outcome. If they're dancing around, or, you don't have to do that same dance with them. And I speak from experience I used to do a lot of international qualifying. So Australia, I don't live in a time zone where phone calls are able to make sense. So if I got an ambiguous answer, I would very politely and professionally be like, "Hey, Olivia, thank you so much for your reply. However, I didn't understand what you meant when you said insert quote here. Can you please help elaborate? I'm trying to get to this." So you call out the unclear messaging, and then you call out, "My goal is to understand if I should schedule a demo with you." So just be very matter of fact, or also say, if people are going back and forth, "Hey, I've noticed in my experience working with, insert titles like you, often a conversation is usually much better and more timely than going back and forth through email. Here's my calendar link. Let's knock all of this out in a couple minutes, so that way I make sure you get the information that you deserve." So you're being just very straightforward.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you so much for your time, presentation, and insights.
Of course. Was that the last question? I was going to say, if not, please message me on LinkedIn. Tell me that you listened to this today, so I know what we're talking about. I really love to pay it forward, so I know we're kind of coming up on time, but I'm really happy to continue this with whoever would like to have the conversation further.
Sure. And I think we'll have the link to your LinkedIn profile in chat, so people will be connecting with you. We need to wrap up. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good luck and good prospecting to everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
George,
Yeah,
back
I
to
know. I know. Can you hear me? Is my mic on?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Eric. Yeah, I was
Okay.
gonna say, what a great presentation. I know I have just connected with Jill, so just wanted to give a shout out. A very well put together presentation. So no pressure, Elric, but you're next. I'm gonna introduce the topic first. We are talking about AI powered sales engagement masterclass. Well, not about it. We're doing the masterclass, AI powered sales engagement masterclass. If there is any one undisputed trend in sales technology right now, it's AI. And previous speakers have already talked and expressed their opinions on where to put or not to put AI in the sales process. With the amount of tools and tactics for AI powered sales engagement, we just can't leave this topic out. And I'm happy to invite Elric Lagloire, SDR manager at Agora Pulse, as our next speaker. Nice to have you, Elric. Welcome, and please take it from here.
Thanks, George. And thanks for having me. So let me share my screen. And today, like George mentioned, we're going to talk about AI. And I'm going to give you how I use it as an SDR leader, but also more specifically for prospecting. So let me share. I'm going to share my screen. Yep. Up. Okay, so really quickly also, I'm going just to introduce myself, so to give you some background about me. So I'm Eric, like George was mentioning. Right now, I just started a new role at Agorapol, so I'm building the SDR team. So I'm mainly focusing on the inbound side of the team and also building the outbound function. And on top of that, also, I'm the creator of the SDR game. So it's a media for SDRs, where I have a newsletter and a podcast where I interview top performing SDRs. So today, we're going to talk about three things. Why I started to use AI for SDR teams, but for prospecting specifically. 4 ways I use AI for prospecting and building go-to-market strategies. And the last thing, I'm going to share with you a story how I booked my biggest opportunity in 2023 using ChatGPT, actually, because today I'm going to talk about that, but more specifically how I use ChatGPT, because that's the main tool I use for prospecting. So if we talk about why I started to use AI, so for me, it took me, generally, I create a lot of content, and it took me a few weeks, a few months after ChatGPT creation to start using it, not using it, but talking about it, because I was pretty, not concerned, but hesitant about using it. And I didn't know if it was going to help me for prospecting, because everyone was talking about it, but I didn't see a lot of people talking about if it was successful and how you could use it. So I was using it, but more in the background, not sharing if it was working or not. And in 2023, actually, I was working at a new company, Castor Doc. So it's a data catalog. So I was working with data leaders, so chief data officers, data governance leaders, for example. So really technical buyer personas. And that was the first time I was working with technical buyer personas, and I needed to learn a lot about this persona. And for me, I started to use ChatGPT actually to understand this buyer persona, to understand the ecosystem, because I was pretty new to this industry. And I think ChatGPT helped me really well to ramp up on this. That's the first thing. And the second thing is to understand quicker and what was relevant to my prospects. So that's how I started to use it. And for me, AI specifically and ChatGPT, for me, it's like my personal assistant that I can use when I need some help with really time-consuming tasks, for example, or when I want to, for example, translate. And I'm going to show you a few examples that how I am using it, obviously. And everything that I'm going to show you today, I'm using ChatGPT 4 with the plugins and the browse function with Bing. So because I don't use the 3.5 version of it, so I'm paying for it. And everything I'm doing is with the ChatGPT 4 version. So the 4 ways I'm using AI, the first one is building an impact matrix, and I'm going to explain what is it. For example, building list of competitors of my customers, for creativity in my outreach, and the last thing is rewriting my emails. So if we talk about the impact matrix, what's the impact matrix? So that's something I learned from Winning by Design. So if you don't know what Winning by Design is a company selling, they do sales training, but also a lot of consulting services, and they have really good content around sales in general. And if we talk about specifically prospecting, they talk about the impact matrix, and the impact matrix basically is 4 things. The first thing on the matrix is the feature of your product. So what deliver the value that your feature. If we focus about the features, we are focusing on the one that bring the most value to your customers. Then for each feature that bring the most value to your customers, we identify the pain points that this feature is going to solve. And then the third thing is the impact of solving this on the business. And then on top of that, we're going to add a story about a relevant prospect, because we want to use a case study, for example, from the customers to explain this. And I'm going to show you an example that I did a couple of weeks ago about Asana, for example. If we talk specifically about the first thing about the impact metrics, we are talking about the main features. And if we focus on those who drive the most value to customers, for example, we can see the main feature is quickly connect complex work across teams, for example. That's something that I learned by using ChatGPT, for example. The second thing is platform scalability. If we have an example here, it's Asana grows as your team's case, for example, allowing you to get more work done across teams with unlimited monthly actions, for example. And the third example will be robust features for business growth. We have specific examples here, drive cross-team efficiency or automate processes. And so here, that's the focus on the features. Now, still using ChatGPT, we can get the pains of this and the business impact. So for example, if we go back for the first one that was quickly connect complex work across teams, we can see the pain that's going to solve. So it's reduce the confusion arising from duplicate tasks, for example, scattered information and lack of visibility across teams. And what's the business impact of that is streamlined communication and collaboration, leading to faster decision-making and reduced project delays. And the last thing that's going to help me with also is going to give me a story about how Asana specifically can help another customers with this. And here we have the customer story. So we have Christopher Bayer, general manager in San Diego at Uber, that said, Asana allows me to simultaneously manage teams across multiple markets. I'm able to ensure all my projects are on track. So if I'm going back to the previous slides, here we have basically one feature tied to the pain points, tied to the impact on the business, and then we have the story. And I did all of this with ChatGPT. And with ChatGPT now, basically having this impact metrics is going to help me thinking about how I could create my messaging, for example, or how I could write an email. So I'm using this specifically impact metrics, for example, when I want to start working for my new company, for example. So I'm doing this right now with AgoApples at my new company to build the messaging and what we're going to say with outbound motion, for example. So the second thing, how I'm using it, and here it's, I was doing it a lot at Castor Doc, my company this year before joining AgoApples, because I was going after a lot of enterprise companies, so companies with more than 1,000 employees. I wanted to know what was who are the competitors of my customers? Because if a competitor is using, a customer is using my solution, their competitor might be interested to use our solution also. So, but the thing is, for example, for the first one, Vestiaire Collective is an e-commerce business in France. It's a pretty big one, and I don't know anything about them. So if I was going to go on Google and start doing that manually for each of my customers, it's going to take me a lot of time. So with ChatGPT 4, actually, I was using the version to go on Google or Bing, for example, and I was asking ChatGPT to use to find me 5 competitors for each one of my customers. That was the query for ChatGPT, and then that was the result, for example. So now we have for the 2 first ones of Vestiaire Collective and JW Player. I had the full list, obviously, for those, but just to show you the example. Really quickly, ChatGPT is able to give me a list of companies that now I can target in my outreach, because, yes, the goal of this is to save me time, but now I know those companies are relevant to me, because if their competitors is, for example, the Real or Poshmark, for example, their competitor Vestiaire Collective, they are competing with them. And so if they are a similar size, for example, they might be interested to a solution, because they want to know how Vestiaire Collective is going to manage their solution with us, for example. That was the second thing. So the first thing, we talk about building an impact matrix. The second one is building a list of competitors of your customers. And this one specifically is pretty quick to do. It's more around building lists and building lists really fast. Now, another example, I was using it at CasterDoc. So I was going after, just to give you a why I was using this specifically, I was prospecting the gaming industry in the US, for example. A company I was going after was Riot Games. If you are familiar with video games, Riot Games, but if you're not familiar with the company, the gaming industry, Riot Games is the company who is developing the game, video game League of Legends. And I was thinking about, hey, can I use ChatGPT to create some creative emails or creative outreach to them? Because the gaming industry, it's pretty fun industry. You want to be not focusing just only on your product or having a boring approach, I would say, because gaming generates video games, and video games are fun. So I was thinking about, hey, what I can do with this industry specifically, and going after them. So here, that's the query I am using with, for example, creativity to create some creative cold emails. So I'm going to read it. So act like the funniest stand-up comedian in the world. Write an email with 15 words or less that connect my prospect job into buying my product, but you make it very funny and must have a reference of League of Legends. My prospect is the head of data at Riot Games. My product is a data catalog for data teams. My prospect job, act as a change agent for the organization and promise them to become data-driven and digitally transformed. And don't include, I hope this finds you well, for example, because ChatGPT loves to use it, for example. And I'm going to show you what's the result of that. And here, that's actually for the email that ChatGPT gave me. So hey, head of data, for example, so as a master of data at Riot Games, you're basically twisted fate dealing outcasts of digital transformation. Our data catalog help you and your team league hope like Casadin, making data-driven decisions faster than the Fed mastery. Ready to level up your data game? Let's talk, and we'll show you how your product will carry your team to victory. This email specifically, it's not something that I've sent to them. I use it as a reference to send to them, because obviously there is a few things that can be improved on it, but I find it really interesting to use, because we are talking about my solution with a data catalog and how it can help, but talking about the video games that they are producing. So I'm showing here specifically, it's I know them and I understand the game. So on my side, I'm more someone who is focusing on processes. It's not that I'm not super creative, but here ChatGPT helped me with creating this email. And I tested a lot for Riot Games, for example. I have other version of this email, but I think ChatGPT was really good at giving me this first draft that I could use and talking to their data team, for example. So that was the third one. The third way I'm using ChatGPT. Now the fourth one is rewriting emails. So this one is going to be really quick, but I use ChatGPT a lot because I think ChatGPT is pretty good at helping you rewrite your emails if they are too long, for example. So here, that's an example. So that was an email I was sending at CasterDoc. I think the email was good, but I wanted to make it shorter, for example. But that's an example. So I asked ChatGPT to make it 50 words or less. And you have my first version on top of it here. And here you have the new version made by ChatGPT. And I found it pretty good because it's you're still using the same information. It's cutting some fluff that I had on my first email. And that's something that I use with a lot of my emails. So that's another way of using it. I think there is a lot of different ways you can use ChatGPT, but specifically for rewriting emails, I'm using it a lot for translating emails into other languages. So English is my third language, for example. So and I use, for example, if I'm writing to, even though if I'm French and sometimes I'm prospecting in French, for me it's quicker to use ChatGPT to translate an email in English to French using ChatGPT, and I'm going to use to rewrite if it's not accurate. Just the version of ChatGPT, because I find it more quicker to use ChatGPT than me translating the whole email. And the last thing also is I use ChatGPT a lot for to fix grammatical errors, because I'm not native speaker in English, and sometimes I don't know how to write things. So I think ChatGPT is really good at fixing my mistakes, for example, in my emails. And obviously in your outreach, when English is not your first language, that's something you have to use. Obviously, I think you can do it in other languages, but that's the way I was using it. And now I'm going to share you a story of how I use AI and specific ChatGPT to book my biggest opportunity this year. So it was an opportunity of $75,000. So that was at CasterDoc, and I'm going to give you some context around how and why I did it this way for this company. So I forgot to mention that I have some, I would say, prospecting experience with a lot of different buyer personas. So today, here specifically, it's not focused on salespeople, because I know a lot of content generalists more focused on salespeople. And here, I use ChatGPT a lot because sometimes the buyer personas I'm going after, they are not super active on LinkedIn, or they don't create content. So for me, it's hard to use something to personalize on about the person I'm going after. So I was a founding BD at CasterDoc, so it's a SaaS business. I was selling basically a data catalog. So not going to enter into details to what it is to data catalog, but I was selling to VP of data, chief data officers, BI leaders. That was the main buyer persona that I was going after. So generally, those prospects specifically, they are not super active on LinkedIn. So it's going to take me a lot of time to find, like, for example, something about all my prospects. So the way I was thinking about it is, because I was selling to large companies, I thought more about having a account-based approach with those accounts. And today I'm going to show you an example with Gong, because for example, at Gong, they have a data team of 30 people. So if you think about the BI leaders, the data engineering leaders, so they have 30 people. So if I can find information, for example, about one person, that's something I can use for the rest of the team. And that's what I did with Gong, and that's how I booked this meeting. So the first thing I've done with Gong, I went to Listen Notes. If you don't know Listen Notes, it's a tool that you can use. It's free. You can go to listennote.com. I think that's the URL. You basically can research podcast episodes instead of using Apple Podcasts, for example, or Spotify directly, because it's going to give you more details about the episodes, and I find it pretty useful. So first thing I do is I wanted to see if we could find podcast episode about the Gong data team. That's what I did. And I found one episode. That's the one I found. So it's a podcast about data engineering, actually. And because for me, it was really hard to find, I would say, information to use in my outreach, that's the only thing I could find about the data team at Gong. And with ChatGPT, actually, ChatGPT with the plugins that you can use, and I'm going to show you the plugins that I was using. ChatGPT can help read the transcript of an episode. So here I had the transcript, so it was easier. Sometimes you don't have the transcript, but for this one I had. So what I did with ChatGPT, I said, okay, now I found the podcast episode that I wanted to use for my outreach. I said, act like the best SDR in the world, read and analyze the transcript of this interview about Gong data team. So I gave the link where you can find the transcript. After reading and analyzing it, give me 5 initiatives or challenges that Gong is facing. Those 5 initiatives or challenges need to be relevant to my product, Castor, data catalog. You need to say why it's relevant, the challenge, and how Castor might help Gong with this. The 2 plugins I use for this specifically is WebPilot, because I use those two because sometimes one is working, the other one is not. So that's why I'm showing those two. So WebPilot and web request. So those two, basically, if you give the URL, it's going to ChatGPT is able to read the URL, and then they can read the transcript on what you're saying. And here, that's a result actually of ChatGPT based on the query as I just show you. I'm going to just read the first one because I think it's pretty interesting. But after analyzing the interview with Gone Data team, here are 5 initiatives or challenges that they are facing that relevant to your product, Castor data cataloging. So the first one, data accessibility and understanding. Gong is dealing with a large amount of data, and it's a challenge to make this data accessible and understandable to all stakeholders. Castor can help by providing a unified, searchable catalog of Gong's data assets, make it easier for users to find and understand the data. So basically, I was using ChatGPT to help me find those things quicker because I was pretty new to this industry and I was not sure if I was listening to a podcast episode what was relevant to my solution. Because sometimes I think I was working for solutions were way much easier to understand how we can help a company based on a podcast episode, for example, and then reach out to them. But here, when I was listening to a podcast episode, I didn't know how to contact them. So ChatGPT was really good at showing me how CastorDoc, my solution, could help Gong. And here, that's an example that I wrote, for an email that I wrote, for example, to the data team at Gong. First part, mentioning the interview and the key takeaways from it, that was relevant to my product, obviously. The highlighting the challenge, explaining how we can help, and the call to action. So Yarin, that was the guest on the episode. So Yarin mentioned on the data engineering show that Gong is integrating data from various sources. This can be a complex and time-consuming process. Our tool can make it easier to integrate and use data from different sources. Can I get your feedback on what we're building? That's an option I've used. And then here, that's another one I wrote, a bit more technical than the first one, but I was using specific words that they used during the episode. So, hey, Yarin mentioned your team has advanced analytic access with PostgreSQL and Snowflake on this show. Data Castor helps your team find and understand data for analysis, with rich metadata and such capabilities. Let me know if you're interested in learning more. And they say yes. And it turned to be the biggest opportunity that the company got this year. And that's it. And that was it. That was basically the different ways I'm using AI and ChatGPT for prospecting. Like I said, I think there is 2 ways. So mainly for preparing your outreach and then for your outreach and make it more efficient. So if you enjoyed this, you can follow me on LinkedIn, subscribe to my podcast or to my newsletter.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Elric. This is great. Thanks for your presentation. I like your approach. I like how you put in all of your, maybe not all of your requests, but you put, act like the perfect SDR in the world, or act like the best comedian in the world. That's such an obvious. I don't know how much it works, but it's such an obvious thing to put in there to try and improve on the results. Actually, we do have a couple minutes for questions, and one of those questions was, so you've shown us some great examples of how things work, maybe not necessarily the output that you would just take and put into your cold email, but you would take it as an inspiration, maybe rephrase certain things, add on certain things. But have you seen maybe areas where generative AI and ChatGPT in particular is not ready yet? So are there any major issues where you would say, no, Gen AI is not there yet, we still need SDRs, SDRs are not going anywhere?
That's a good question. So at the beginning, I thought it was the case because today, what I just showed you, the queries I'm using on ChatGPT, they are pretty I won't say it's trial and errors. So I tested a lot, and so that's what I'm testing right now, and that's, I would say, I'm pretty happy with the results. So at the beginning, I was not happy with it, and that's why I said it took me a couple weeks or months to start thinking about creating content about ChatGPT because of that, like what you just mentioned. Because if you just say write a code Gmail for my product, well, the result is not really good. So that's why you need to give context, or like you mentioned, act like the best SDR in the world or the funniest stand-up comedian, for example.
Actually, yeah, the next one kind of stems from the first question, and it was, these are all from the chats, by the way. Thank you guys. Thanks to everyone who's participating and asking your questions. But can you describe your workflow? So you said, it's trial and error. It's, you have to learn how to use it. Have you developed more of a workflow, like an algorithm of when to use ChatGPT in the process, maybe those plugins? What does that workflow look like, just generally?
I don't, because I am this year I was a solo. I was on a team, but I was not managing the team, so it was my own process, I would say. So, but right now I didn't start using it for the current team, but the way I'm thinking about it, using ChatGPT with a team specifically, is building three things: the research that you can do about your prospects, building lists of companies, because I show an example of how you could build this, for example. And the third one is in your outreach and how you could use it. So that will be the workflow. So how I'm going to do that is documenting it and training my team on it, and the different ways they can use it in their processes.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Elric. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up, but again, as always, if you're able to stick around in the chats, because there's quite a few more questions, and we're going to try to get back to all of those people after the event. But thanks again. It was a pleasure having you today, and we're going to move on with the next presentation, or panel rather.
Thank you, George, and thanks everyone for joining us. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Okay, so we're moving on, switching gears a little bit. We're going to be talking about training and coaching this time. So for all of you guys who are managers, or maybe sales professionals, SDRs, and salespeople that are looking to become managers, obviously one of the key skills to have is to know how to coach and train your teams. So to dissect this topic as much as we can, we're happy to introduce our following speakers. Bethany Steckenfeld, co-founder and CEO at SendSpark. Stuart Moss, director of sales development at Dealfront. And Jason Bay, founder and CEO at Outbound Squad. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Good to be here.
Thanks, George.
Okay, so let me quickly check the question. We've prepared quite a few questions, and as always, we're going to be taking questions from the audience as well. We're going to start with maybe the landscape, the current kind of state of things in your view, guys. So how has the sales coaching and training landscape changed over the past couple of years, and has it changed at all in your opinion? Let's start with you, Stuart.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I certainly think it's changed. I think the landscape will always keep changing and evolving. I think the difficulty is not every organization can easily keep up with that pace of change. I think that's always really difficult for organizations. But I think the change is often driven by the recipient of coaching and learning, and their expectations of that material or learning that they're getting. It's good to be at sales development excellence, because SDRs are actually a really easy group to demonstrate that point with, I think, because it's fair to say that a large percentage of SDRs are typically earlier in their career. They're typically, not always, but typically a younger audience. And how young people consume knowledge is vastly different to how I would have consumed knowledge at their age, because things change so quickly. I would have never had YouTube or TikTok or learning from Joe Rogan and his podcast, but now that's all I learn from, right? And my SDR team are exactly the same. So I think because of that, the landscape constantly shifts with it, and there's little value in trying to coach and train people in ways that just don't resonate with them anymore, because that's not the way the world is. So yeah, I think it shifts. I think it always is going to shift, and one of the challenges that we have as leaders is keeping up with that and making sure that what we do is valuable for our teams.
Absolutely. Bethany, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. And I'd also add that just over the last few years, the world has changed a lot. Like it's hard to even remember, but before 2020, most of us were working in an office. Now a lot of teams are remote or hybrid, and so just the way that people are learning is really different, and also the way that like people need to sell is very different. So if we're talking about this specifically, on how are SDRs selling and connecting to people, like there's been just dramatic shifts in the industry over the last few years, and even now we've seen a greater drive to efficiency. So I think that you always got to think about when you're training, how are people consuming information and what are they consuming, and like the pace of change over the last few years has been just astronomical.
Jason, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the principles of like how you train and teach and how people learn things, that hasn't really changed. The medium to your Stuart and Bethany, your 2 points, has definitely changed. I think attention span is a really big thing to pay attention to.
Mhm.
But the angle that I have a little bit of a different angle on this. The frontline leader is the one delivering most of the training and coaching, and enablement plays in that. I think that job has gotten much harder because of all of the distractions. So to give you an example, working in a virtual environment when you were used to being in the office, I literally work with teams, and frontline leaders are getting bombarded on Slack by their leaders asking for updates like every 20 to 30 minutes. And then they do that to their team. And it's like really hard for them to set aside half hour here, an hour there to just coach, to do proactive coaching. The thing that every frontline leader should spend a third to a half of their job, like working with their reps. And I find that there's so much pressure, especially in software right now, where there's so much pressure to get outcomes. They're getting so much pressure from the top that they're not able to make that time to actually do the coaching. The only other thing that I would add too is that, social media, I think, plays a big part of it, but just like our phones here, like I think one of the hardest things that we do as leaders and reps, honestly, when I ask people is like, if you got a text right now, would your phone vibrate? And everyone says, yeah, it would. Well, why? Like, so if you got a text as a frontline leader, who would you be responding to a text from that's urgent enough that you need to respond to in the moment? There's so many distractions like that I think make it harder to do your job now, and protecting your attention is really the biggest challenge. That was a long-winded answer, but that's
No, but
that's my
yeah.
observation.
You know what? Probably as a follow-up to that, and Stuart did touch on this briefly. I wanted to ask you guys on the technologies currently, maybe new technologies that you could that you're excited about, that you're using in the training and coaching. Stuart was talking about simple things like podcasts and YouTube videos, which is truly, like, I recently went to this event, this talk given by a very well-known business guy from Ukraine, where I'm from, and somebody asked him, "Hey, how do you consume? Like, how do you keep learning?" And he said the only thing he said, he never, like, he didn't mention a number of channels. He said YouTube. The only thing I consume is YouTube. And this is probably one of the most the richest people from Ukraine, like business practitioners. I'm wondering what role does technology play in SDR training and coaching in your companies? Are there specific tools, platforms besides, podcast platforms that you found improved your training processes and allow for more effective coaching? Sorry, let's start with Jason. I keep forgetting to
Okay.
to do this.
I hate to be contrarian. I'm probably going to be pretty contrarian today. I think we could do with less technology, actually. When I work with reps and sales teams, when I see them share their screen, there's usually like 5 different tools right in their Chrome shortcuts bar. I'm like, they got to log in and out of all of these different tools. There's Rev Intelligence, Conversational Intelligence, there's their sales engagement platform, and we're starting to see some consolidation. But podcasts, YouTube, I mean, that's kind of old technology. It's been around for a long time. I think the stuff that's gotten pretty cool is the conversation intelligence, whether Gong or Chorus or whatever you might use, has gotten smarter to where you can put trackers and stuff so you can see without having to listen to a call, is the rep using the new talk track that we talked about. And I'm pretty bullish on AI not really being that great for cold email right now either. I don't really see coaching from AI happening very well right now. I think it gets you like maybe 70-80% of the way there if you have a lot of the good inputs. But I would say from a technology standpoint, I think we could strip away some of the technology and just get really back to basics. Like, are you even listening to recordings of reps making calls? Are you using the conversational intelligence tool to look through transcriptions? Are you looking at the emails that they send? I'm just like really bullish on getting back to the basics, honestly, with this stuff and stripping away some of the technology and making it easier to do the thing that you really need to spend your time doing.
Okay, thanks, Jason. I have a feeling Bethany has a slightly different take on technology and coaching, given that she's representing SenseSpark. But Bethany, do
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like your point about like focusing on the basics and removing distractions. Like, I definitely agree. And like, I'm one of those people where my phone is on silent. Like, I check it enough that I don't need to be interrupted to check it. So I do agree with you, but I'm going to say like, there's definitely some technology that I found is just a huge time saver, even if not necessarily for our team to use, but, for me to use on the analytics side of things. So like one thing it comes to mind immediately, we just got our company set up with June.so for like data analysis. And what's really cool about that is it lets us kind of tie in conversations or outreach strategies or different things we're doing top of funnel to see how that connects to revenue. That lets us like optimize campaigns. So, our team's not really looking at the data, but I am. And so that's helping me steer people in the right direction. And then when it comes to the conversational intelligence, I totally agree. We've been testing out a few different tools, and the two I like the most at the moment are Update AI and Fathom. With Fathom, it gives you like it'll alert you if you go on, I forget the term they use, but if you talk too much, it'll be like you're on a monologue, like stop and let the other person like talk. So I think things like that where it's helping people in real time, or at least afterwards you can go through the transcript, go through the data, kind of figure out some insights that lets people continue to improve. And then of course I'll do my own like shameless plug for SenseSpark, just being able to like record videos and show people like, hey, this is how you update this specific thing in reply, or that, this is how you embed a video here. This is how you fix an account. And then having all that information tracked in a reasonable way, you're able to watch the video. It saves me a ton of time. So I only have to say things once, and then other people can look it up in the shared video folder. So those are some of the tools I think have been absolute game changers. But always love trying out new things.
Thanks, Bethany. Stuart, do you have any favorites in terms of tools or platforms for training and coaching?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, I think, Jason, you made an interesting point about AI and email writing. I think some of the challenges, people just lean into the tool doing the work for them rather than using it to assist. If we were talking about email specifically, I think tools like Lavender are pretty cool for actually helping coach you and understanding how you can improve along the way. And you get kind of those scores and grades so you can see yourself improving, and you almost end up competing with yourself. So I think it's how it's used alongside coaching and learning that can make the difference, rather than expecting the technology to do the job for you. At Dealfront, we are trying to make much more of a formalized learning for people. So part of what we're doing at the moment, for example, is building out an SDR university and an outbound academy in a tool called HighSpot. So we can kind of have, on day one, you learn this, on day two, you learn this. And within that, we're being considerate of everyone learns a bit differently, right? So Beth, cover your ears, but some of that is using Loom to record videos. Sorry, but we've got a bunch of videos in there. There's written content. Some of it is tasks and learning on the job, but it's trying to mix up different ways that you can learn and absorb, because everyone's different. And I think that's one thing a lot of companies miss, is they leverage technology as like a one size fits all. And they slap learning within it and say, wham, there you go, learn, and then wonder why people aren't as engaged with that learning along the way. So we're trying to leverage technology to best mix up our learning for our SDRs, so that there's something for everyone and it can be absorbed along the way, really.
Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, I was going to move on to more kind of practical, maybe technical aspects of, I would say, techniques that that you guys prefer in the learning process. So we've already talked about formal versus informal learning, learning on your own kind of mistakes and doing your going your own journey, or listening to intelligence tools such as Chorus or Gong, or our favorite that we're using here at Reply called Avoma. Shout out to Avoma. So what specific coaching techniques have proven successful specifically for you guys? Is there any approach that you could kind of separate and give an example of? Let's start with Beth and you.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like a philosophy that we have is just really learning by doing. Like, I feel like, there's a ton that you could train someone and prepare them for, but like the best way you just learn is like being in the same situation again and again and again. And, ideally feeling confident that someone else is there to like back you up or help if needed and support you. But like, we just want people to like learn on the job and then get feedback immediately after, and then try again. There's a, study I read like forever ago that stuck with me about, 2 art classes where people needed to build clay pots. And in one class, they were graded on the quality of the clay pots, and the other one, they were graded on the quantity. And, the ones who try so hard to make it perfect, their pots were way worse than the ones who just rapid fire were creating pot after pot after pot, because you learn by experience. So that's, the environment that we try to set is like, it's okay to make mistakes, just keep trying and like be out there and get feedback and keep iterating and improving.
Jason?
Yeah, a couple things. So I think the frontline leader is the most neglected position. Typically in the sales org, they get the least amount of training. It's usually a top rep that worked up and they get zero training on how to actually teach stuff. So Rain Group has got an interesting stat. Reps forget 85 to 90% of the training that they get is no longer effective after a quarter. So the reinforcement of the stuff that you teach is the more important part of the equation. So I have a framework that I teach to frontline leaders called the reinforcement loop. It's very simple. It's teach, practice, observe, and coach. So teaching is different than telling. So I can't just say, hey, George, instead of sending this email, why don't you send this one? That's not really teaching. You're not giving someone the ability to fish. You're just telling them what to do. Practice is the most neglected piece. So a lot of times in sales, we practice on prospects. So we try something for the first time in a live high stakes situation. So that's everything from role plays, which can be done in team settings, one-on-ones, etc. The observe piece, so actually taking time to watch the rep in action, and then deliver coaching. And you got to do all of those things. The most neglected pieces that I see are the practice piece and then the coaching piece. What kind of feedback do we have? Scorecards that we use? Do we create an environment where a rep can self-diagnose their own problem and attempt to help themselves? That would be the framework that I would recommend, looking at those 4 pieces and kind of grading yourself in each of those areas.
I love it. Thanks, Jason. This really does resonate because nobody taught me how to lead a team when I started leading a team. So, yeah, that's true to all of those points. Stuart, any thoughts here?
Yeah. I think you asked specifically, is there anything that we've done or and found it successful? And I think one of the things that I've found works really well is so at Dealfront, when we email people, it's hyper personalized. That's just the model that works for us and gets us really good results. And so one thing we implemented, for example, during our onboarding process was part of that learning by doing, essentially, but in a non-pressurized environment. And so our new SDR hires will, part of their onboarding will task them to use the Dealfront platform to go and find 10 or 20 or 30 prospects in their region, in the right markets, the correct ICPs, and then use the model that they're taught to write outbound emails to those people. They then send those emails to the SDR leaders or team leaders who will, like they're the prospect, who will then provide feedback, critique them, and that throughout the onboarding process, the SDRs will iterate those emails and continue to kind of revise them until they're happy and comfortable with them. And at the end of the onboarding model, those are the emails that they send out, the first ones out into the field to their actual prospects. And so it's that learning by doing, but just using that email part as an example and how we coach that, I absolutely stand behind that as well. I think that's the right way to do it.
All right, thanks, Stuart. Next question. As always, I think we've been talking about balance in one way or another on all of these panels today. But how do you balance training and coaching versus actual work, actual daily responsibilities of SDRs, that ensuring that they have enough time to learn, but also to generate pipeline and everything that we hired them for? So how do you find that balance? Let's start with Jason.
Yeah, the general strategy that works pretty well here is less teaching, so fewer topics, going deeper, and then more time coaching and reinforcing those topics. So assuming that a rep is out of onboarding and they're ramped, it's instead of running 3 sessions this week where we talk about email and then subject lines and then we talk about objection handling, let's pick one thing to work with the entire team on. So where's the biggest bottleneck in my team? Is it email? Is it phone? Is it objections? Whatever it might be. In my one-on-ones, I'm going to pick the biggest bottleneck with that rep, and then I'm going to spend the majority of the time reinforcing what we just trained. So that's proactive reinforcement. That's literally outside of the meetings, listening to reps doing the calls, shadowing calls live, looking at the emails they're sending that proactive feedback, asking them to self-assess, etc., and bringing that feedback to them outside of those sessions as well. I would highly recommend not doing more than 2 or 3 like group style team meetings per week. Typically one of those would be spent, reviewing or breaking down a good example of this and providing some feedback on it so reps can see it. One of those meetings might be pure training and skill development. And then you might use another one of those just for, touching base and accountability type of thing. And just really keeping the internal meetings few as possible. And training should be very narrow in topic and very deep in focus.
Right. More doing, less teaching. I love that. Bethany, how about you? Sorry, Beth, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I have a similar like mindset there where it's really about like the narrow focus. And like what I try to keep in mind is like how relevant is like what people are learning to what they're actually doing. Cause like if you teach something and they're not actually doing it for 2 weeks, they're gonna forget it by the time they actually do it. So it's really about just like going in, doing that, like, okay, maybe, you know, this week we're working on adding video to like a sequence or something. And so it's just like going all in and doing that really well before like adding different things. It's like I don't like to pre-teach like, oh, here's like a whole lesson, like learn everything, learn all of our systems all at once. It's just try to do a very narrow scope, do it well, and then add more, learn it, and add it well. And that way people feel confident the whole time and they, you know, are able to practice right away.
Thanks, Bethany. Stuart?
Yeah, I think looking at this for a slightly different angle, I guess, I think it's up to the leader to intelligently balance people's calendars a little bit when it comes to training and coaching. You know, putting time in, putting a training at 10:30 a.m. every day, if that's when your SDRs typically smash the phones and statistically book the most meetings, it's a bad time to try and book training sessions. But I think SDRs are mostly taught, you know, cold calling, emailing techniques, social selling, you know, and stuff that revolves around that. And then their day-to-day responsibilities essentially revolve around speaking to prospects, right? And so there's the perfect time to try and apply and test those things out that you've been taught, hopefully at an intelligent time of the day to do it, because it's fundamentally your role. So it comes back to that learning by doing. I think that's the challenge, though. I think some SDRs struggle with that. I personally know SDRs or some SDRs that could beautifully articulate the best outbound model in the world, but rely solely on inbound and do very little outbound. And so it's that actually applying what you're learning and doing it. And whilst a leader can help coach you and push you, the greatest SDRs, I think, absorb knowledge and then just continually test it and augment that with stuff that we were almost saying earlier, you know, YouTube, podcasts, books that they read, to then just outpace other people because they can apply that additional knowledge. So I think some of this lies on actually the SDR themselves being motivated to take that learning, test it, make it their own, and then deliver against it. But the leader absolutely has the onus of making sure they're balancing an SDR time and not being disruptive, and doing it at a good time that means the SDRs can take that, use it, and apply it to be successful.
All right. Thanks, Stuart. I think we're going to be closing off with one final question, and then depending on if we have a minute or two, look at the questions in the chats. How do you measure the ROI of coaching and training efforts? What are your recommendations? Do you only look at, you know, obvious things like meetings booked by those reps or revenue generated, or is there anything else? What are your best ways to measure whether the coaching efforts are efficient? Let's go in the opposite order. Let's start with Stuart.
Yeah, I think one thing I always do with my SDRs is get them to zoom out a little bit, and I always use the terrible analogy of you know, if you're trading stocks, right? Unless you're a perfect day trader, which I certainly am not, if you're constantly looking at the chart, you will have a heart attack 15 times a day at the ups and downs, right? But actually, if you zoom out and you leave your investment there for a while, you can see actually where you started and where you got to. And usually that journey is quite inspiring and you become proud of it. And I think SDR training and coaching is exactly the same. If you zoom out a little bit with SDRs and think about where were we? What did 3 months ago look like? How were we working then? And what does today look like in terms of the quality of your meeting, the velocity of those meetings going through pipe, the outcomes that we're getting, dispositions and sentiments of calling, the response rate you're getting to your emails and positive responses. Actually, I think taking a moment to step back and having a look at it can be, and really understanding where you were and, you know, you're from and you're to, essentially, it is one of the most sobering things. And SDRs are typically really, really proud of that journey that they've gone on in a really short amount of time as well. I think SDRs also forget how quickly that they learn stuff and deliver against it, and the value that they're delivering for an organization. So I think with SDRs, one thing I really like to do is just take a step back with them from time to time and assess those things with them.
Thanks, Stuart. I did not. Well, that warranted. Love the new Mac OS. Bethany, what are your favorite KPIs and metrics to measure success of your coaching efforts?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you're looking at like how well are they performing on the job. So like meetings booked, leads, things like that. But I would say like when I think of coaching, I'm really looking at how the employee should be progressing through the organization. And I'd say like, especially SunSpark, we're a startup, we're a small team, a lot of people have a lot of responsibilities. And there's a lot of different ways for upward mobility that depend on that specific person and what they want. Like, do they want to be a manager, or do they want to go to be like, and doing enterprise sales, or do they want to be doing like webinars and public appearances? And, it's like, what do you really want? And so before I hire people, like that's an important part of the interview process. I try to figure out, well, where are they going to be moving in the organization? If everything goes well, like what do they want for themselves? And so then when I'm like looking at, hey, how was the coaching, the onboarding, all this integration going? It's, well, are they on track to hit the goals that they want for themselves and that I envision them doing in the organization? So I'd say that's the secondary thing that's important for employee retention and satisfaction.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bethany. Jason?
I just dropped it into the chat, should pop up in a couple seconds. But so effort, effectiveness, or effort, efficiency, and effectiveness. So I think what's really important when you are training and coaching as an enablement team is just to think about what are the key behaviors that we are looking to drive. Like what would make our efforts a success? I know it sounds very simple, but a lot of times we just do training for the sake of training. So effort, the leading indicators, that's a great way to see if behavior change is happening, because behavior creates the outcomes, right? The efficiency is if we're getting reps to send more emails or make more calls, are they getting through? Are people picking up? Are they getting replies? Are they getting opens? Then ultimately the effectiveness, what are the outcomes of that? You can apply that same framework across sales development or the work that you're doing with AEs as well. But I think the big thing is know what you're actually trying to make an impact on and what those key behaviors are that do drive the outcomes, and to focus on the behavior and measure it, which you can do with all the technology that we talked about today. You can measure that behavior.
Thank you, Jason. I think we're a little bit over time here, but that's the luxury of being the last panel for the day. I would like to thank you guys for joining and sharing your thoughts on the topic. Again, Stuart, Bethany, Jason, we appreciate you very much. We're going to be moving on to the closing statements, closing thoughts today. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
See ya.
Okay, so Olivia,
what a day. Thank you everyone for joining us today and for sticking till the end. We really hope that you enjoyed the event and been able to get a few ideas or insights to implement with your teams and within your processes. And we appreciate all the questions you asked during the event, and we're super happy to say that Brian Edwards Jr. and Preston Lambrecht, these are people who deserve special thanks and some cool swag from Reply.io. Please reach out to our PR manager, Helen, and we will share contact details in the chat. Thanks again to all speakers for sharing their knowledge, their expertise, their insights and challenges. That was super insightful and super inspiring to all of us. And we will be sending the replay links for this along with some extra resources in a bit. Keep an eye out for an email. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.